Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're going to be getting into next Charlie's interview with
We're here with Big Balls. And
Doge
so right now we're counting the national debt, and by the end of
and
this
National
podcast, you guys are going to be able
Design
to see
Studio
how much
guy, Big
debt we
Balls.
acquired while we were just having this
Yeah.
conversation. This is going to get interesting. Make sure you watch till the very end. So I'm going to click it right now, and the debt starts counting. So far we're already at $300,000 in just a few seconds. Now we're at 500,000, and we're about to hit $1 million.
It's a lot of
How
money.
bad is the national debt crisis here in the United States?
I mean, we can see the chart here. What is this, the last 40, 50 years? It's really ballooned recently. You could, this is a very, very aggressive slope. The main concern with the national debt is that we don't have any plan to fix it. So it's just going to continue to grow at an exponential rate until we actually do something to start to alleviate the debt pressure. And then we have a huge amount of interest payments on the debt as well. I think the interest payments on the debt now already surpass Medicare, SSA. It's well past $1 trillion a year. And as we amass more debt, we're going to be also amassing the amount of interest that we have to pay on that debt. So if we are at 1 trillion in interest payments now, which is going towards servicing all this debt, and this public debt is held by other countries, it's held by the people of America. Over time, what will happen is we will actually have the interest payments exceed the income that the government has. So the government makes right around $4 trillion a year. So once we pay more than $4 trillion a year in interest payments, we're going to be in a really sticky position where the government will, at one point be forced to either print a whole lot more money, which will drastically increase inflation, which will hurt the American people, or default. And I mean, treasury bonds are thought of as extremely safe investment vehicles, so that's unlikely to happen. So what will probably happen is, as a result of this huge number, and a lot of people think like the government money is kind of just magic money, like it's just, it's free money because the government is able to print money. But the more money supply that the government puts into the system, the more money that the government prints to pay off its debts, the less rich the American people become. Your dollar becomes less worthy. And inflation will drastically increase over time if we do not fix this problem with the national debt.
And when we're talking about debt, how is it that we've already spent $14 million while we've been sitting? Where is that money going?
Well, there's a few different places. Some of the debt is discretionary, which means that
Because when you look at this chart, we've been speaking for 2 minutes and 30 seconds so
it's
far.
a lot
We're
of
already
money,
at
yeah.
$16 million. What has that money gone to?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different things that the government spends money on. Part of it is discretionary. So these are, grants and contracts that the government will give out to third parties to, fulfill its services. And then some of that spending is mandatory. It's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, food benefits, those types of things. So it's a little bit of both, but I think there's a high amount to which this money is wasted. I think this is due to a number of reasons. First of all, I think that there's not enough identity checking in a lot of the benefits. It's a little too easy to get benefits, not in terms of the eligibility requirements, but just in terms of actually making sure that people are eligible. And then in the discretionary spending category, there is a lot of wasteful spending where we spend way too much money on, for example, I know tech pretty well. We spend way too much money on technological services as a government. So, the government is just really, overspends on everything. So it's a huge number.
And right,
$105,000 a second.
yes,
That's pretty crazy.
$105,000 a second. What percentage of our economy do you think is upheld by fraud? Say they eliminate all fraud. What percentage of our economy is gone?
I think it's a meaningful percentage, but it's less than we think. I think a lot of the money that's going towards fraud is not contributing to our domestic economy. It's going internationally. It's going back to Somalia, especially for some of the, Minnesota, Somalian fraud cases. So I think a lot of the money is actually, you know, contributing negatively to us, and it's not adding to our GDP, and it's going to these other countries.
Really, that's a different response than I would have thought because I think if they were to eliminate all fraud, for instance, like Medicare and Medicaid, I wonder how many of these little clinics you'd see everywhere, how many of these daycares you'd see for childcare, for instance. how many of these places that are receiving all this money would be gone, and how much of that would affect the economy?
I don't think it would, super deeply affect the economy.
You don't think it would?
I mean, the GDP is just a measure of how much money is being exchanged.
Like, do you think it's safe to say that 10% of our economy is from fraudulent money?
There's fraudulent money from the government, and then there's fraud, period, where, private people are ripping off private companies or private people. I think there is a percentage of the economy which is held up by the government, but I don't think it's a meaningful percentage of GDP. I think it's probably less than you think. And the reason for that is the money is typically, it is true that, people will receive the fraudulent money and then they'll go out and buy cars. They'll buy Mercedes and BMWs. But a lot of the money is being, kind of stolen and siphoned out of the country. And I think that's a very meaningful percentage as well.
Once that money's gone, it's never coming back.
No, definitely
Once
not.
that money's in a
Yeah,
suitcase to Somalia, it's never coming back.
Yeah, we can't sue for that money back. No way. Yeah, the money's gone.
We're not going to go get it from that terrorist group over there.
Probably not, no.
I don't think we'll be able to get that. And right now we're in a pivotal point in the country because if you look at this graph, this has mainly gone up since 2020. We've had exponential increases in the debt. And it's affecting people like me and you and our generation the most. You're 20 years old, I'm 23, and between me and you at Doge and me exposing the fraud and what the work you guys did at Doge is it really put a highlight on the fraud that's taking place here inside the United States because everyone knew that fraud was happening, but nobody really knew how bad it was. And then when you look at these graphs like this, you understand that if we don't get this under control, whether it be fraudulent spending or just government spending in general, our generation really will not have the opportunity that all these other generations before us had. Because look, they didn't have that much of an increase in debt. That means their dollar was worth more and they're able to buy more stuff with their dollar. And if you look at these graphs since 2021, the debt has been going up each and every single year.
I guess a good way to look at this is we're basically borrowing against the value of our United States dollar. So you might not feel it right away, but over time we've definitely felt, for example, the prices of homes increase. It's now much harder to get a home in America. And that's because we've been continuing to borrow against our dollar's value. And at some point, the quote unquote margin call will happen and we will have to print more money to start satisfying this debt and start servicing it better. I mean, this slope is pretty insane. I like how recently it's kind of topped off a little bit more, but it's been a pretty insane thing to look at from the inside.
Yeah, and on the side, we have a few stats right here. Every newborn baby inherits $116,000 in debt. And if we were to try and pay off our debt at $1 million per day, it would take 106,000 years. And if you had just $1 bills, you could go to the moon and back 6 times if you were to go and put out every single dollar. The debt's insane. How'd you become Big Balls?
I didn't really mean to be named Big Balls. It was just something that I put on my LinkedIn. It wasn't like the username on LinkedIn, but it was what was in the URL path. So it was linkedin.com/bigballs. So it was like kind of hidden. And I don't know, I just thought it was fun. I didn't really expect anyone to find it.
I imagine you weren't thinking everyone was just going to be calling you Big Balls everywhere you went.
No, not really. My dad used to call me Big Balls, and I've always looked up to my dad, and I guess I thought it'd be fun to put it there.
You do have a bit of an interesting history, and we're going to get more into the national debt and everything like that. But when you were just 15 years old, you got into technology. When did you learn about AI? How old were you?
Well, AI has been more of a recent development. I was in AI before ChatGPT launched, but AI is really cool. It's maybe since I was 16, 17.
You founded your first business called Tesla.sexy LLC.
There's a
What was that?
funny idea here. So back in the day, Elon tried to arrange the models so it was SEXY, but there was a copyright issue with the E. So they did the Model 3 with 3 lines instead, and they called it Model 3. And in some of the original models, it had those 3 lines, so it kind of looked like an E. So I was a big fan of Tesla at the time. I just thought it was such an epic mission. I started like this Tesla.sexy LLC thing just as a joke.
And what was it?
It was just a small thing that a few of my friends and I ran together. It was like some meme image website or something.
So this is all when you're in high school.
Yeah, so I had a few internships through high school. Then I started some more companies. I started a cybersecurity company. Um, learned a lot there because I had this really big goal in building what's called a content delivery network, and I had very little money to get it done. So I had to learn a lot about how Linux works under the hood. And Linux is the operating system that is powering a lot of the internet. Like when people are going to watch this interview through YouTube or X or Spotify or whatever it may be, that's all happening through Linux. But I really didn't have any money at the time, so I had to figure out a lot of the technical details on my own.
So you're basically just this genius who discovers the internet. And were you always on the internet when you're growing up? Like, were you always in the coding in the computer? Were you that kid in class that was kind of just tucked away on their computer?
Not always, but I think COVID brought it out in me. I think it brought it out in a lot of people because all I could do was sit at home. I couldn't see any of my friends. We were all kind of locked away, and the classes were online, and I had a hard time concentrating on classes that are online. Um, so I started just like picking it up as a hobby, and I got a Raspberry Pi. Um, it's pretty cool. It's what a lot of kids will get, when they're trying to learn how a lot of this stuff works. And it was just kind of obsessive for me. Like I was just able to spend 14 hours straight, not leaving my desk, just writing code. It was just so interesting. It was like satisfying my mind. So I really discovered it during COVID, and I think that's a story that's very relatable with a lot of tech people. They weren't necessarily super into tech. They had a larger scene than that, but when they got locked down, it was like, okay, well, there's not many things to do, so tech seemed like a natural answer.
So then you become obsessed with technology. You start your businesses, Tesla Sexy. You go get an internship at Path Network. And then before you even graduate, you got a job at Neuralink. What was that like?
Neuralink was one of the best places I've ever worked.
And how did you get a job at Neuralink before you had even graduated high school?
Well, I saw the Neuralink mission and I was just super interested in it. It's like, well, it seems like a very noble cause of, there's a lot of people that have disabilities. They can't see, they can't move, and it makes their interfacing with the world really hard. And Neuralink seemed like a well-positioned company to fix that. So I just thought it was the most like I didn't think there was any more inspiring mission than a mission like that. So I actually tried to get the job my junior year, and Neuralink is the kind of place where they're pretty hardcore about who they hire. They hire like one intern a year for a specific position, and they have thousands of people apply. So my junior year, I really really wanted it, and I put all my other internship opportunities aside, and I was like, I've just got to work there, and it didn't work out. Um, they basically said, sorry, come back next year. And I had the whole summer available to me. And so I really spent the summer very focused, trying to sharpen my skills as much as possible. And then when a few months roll around and I've started school again as a senior, the head of software of Neuralink reaches out to me. He saw my resume, and he invites me to interview with him directly. And from there, got the job. I was so excited to take the job and get started that I actually skipped prom and graduation my senior year. It's like, oh, this is so much more exciting. And I worked, I basically never slept in that job. It was like 7 days a week, like every waking hour in the office, basically, from probably like 10 a.m. to 3 a.m. every day. But it was really, really exciting. And the talent of the people there was very high. Like these people were unbelievably good at their jobs, and there was so much to learn from them. Then when I went to school after, in comparison, it just felt really, really boring because I went from a position where I was working all the time and then the adrenaline rush was always insane to a situation where I'm like sitting in class the whole day and I'm like just trying to learn off of a book. And I'd been kind of spoiled. So it was hard for me to go back to school and, learn in a classroom.
And real quick break from the interview to tell you guys about the sponsor of this video, Opus Clip. What started as an AI clipper has now become the most powerful AI growth tool for creators and businesses. Over 10 million people are using Opus, and it's helped generate over 61 billion views. I personally use it to distribute my content for all platforms from Facebook to Instagram to YouTube Shorts to TikTok, and I've had extremely good results. I've literally received millions of views on my own just through using Opus. And they just came out their new AI editor 3.0 that comes with smarter auto framing, better variety scoring, and new captions. With Opus, you're able to reach millions of more people with half the effort. It's essentially like having a video editor and a social media manager for a fraction of the cost. And right now, for you guys watching this video, Opus is gonna hook you guys up with a sweet deal. You get 1 week free and 3 months at 50% off. All I have to do is go to the link in the description down below or to the pinned comment. I promise Opus Clip is a game changer. And now let's get back into the interview. How old were you when you started working at Neuralink?
I think they offered me when I was 17, and then I took the job when I was 18 or something.
And so you're completely self-taught up to that point?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's funny because now you have all these kids going to college with AI and to study AI. And you started just during COVID as a 15-year-old, and then you somehow got a job at Neuralink. And when you were working there, what were you working on?
Um, I was on the core software team, so it was kind of a bunch of everything.
And then at what point did you get introduced to Elon Musk, or did he ever find you when you were there?
Maybe I was on like one meeting with him there. I didn't really meet him there, but when one of my friends was considering joining Doge, he referred me to start working there too. So I decided that I think the national debt is a huge problem. It's a really big problem, and I think that government services are very outdated. Like they're not serving the people super well. So I joined because I thought that there was a chance that maybe we can improve this, that we could take a look at the national debt and cut some things out that definitely aren't required for the government to be spending money on. And I'm sure we'll go through some of those grants later. But I was really
the prospect of everlasting life. When Adam sinned against Jehovah God, being a perfect man, he in a sense invited in pain, suffering, and death to the human family. You can think of it like this. In the beginning, Jehovah God gave Adam and Eve a trust fund, a retirement account. It was sitting there. They could draw on it forever. Their families, their descendants could all draw on it forever. They would never want anything ever. But what happened? God greedy. He took something that was not his to take, and now we suffer the consequences. You know, today, there's even some people you might think they have it all. They have all the money they never need. Sometimes they get greedy. They take other people's money and then they lose everything. Exactly what Adam did. So now, why does Adam's sin affect you personally today? Adam lived thousands and thousands of years ago. Why is it affecting me and you? Let's open our Bibles. We'll find it out in God's Word. We're going to look up Romans 5:12. We're going to get the answer to that question, why Adam's sin affects you and I. And there, Romans 5:12, it says, that is why, just as through one man sin entered into the world, and death through sin, so death spread to all, because they had all sinned. So because Adam was a perfect man, and he sinned, he passed that sin down to each and every one of us. It's almost like a genetic code, a DNA. You can liken it to this. Say there's a factory, it's got a machine stamping out metal parts. Now that stamp gets a flaw in it, a defect. What happens to every part it stamps? Stamp, defective part, stamp, defective part, over and over again. And then that stamp, that defect on that stamp, get bigger and bigger, and the parts get worse and worse. And that's what happened for mankind, because what Adam did originally. So the question though is, it seems pretty perilous, doesn't it? Hopeless. So the question is, can right-hearted descendants of Adam, which we are all descendants of Adam, ever be rescued from this condition we're stuck in of inherited sin and death? That is a question worth finding the answer, isn't it? Well, you know what the answer is? 100% yes, we can relate to this. Because by means of the two greatest acts of love ever shown to mankind, ever shown to you personally. Let's find out what these acts of love are. Let's begin at John 3:16. Here we're going to see what Jehovah God did for mankind to help us out in the very near future. And John 3:16 reads, for God loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son, so that everyone exercising faith in him might not be destroyed, but have everlasting life. Now just think about that for a second. Jesus Christ was Jehovah God's first creation. He had spent eons of time with his Father. Can you imagine now Jehovah God is willing to let his Son come down to earth, innocent being an insurance policy, pay the payment that Adam squandered? And remember, this was going to be an easy task, was it, for Jesus? No, he was going to die a painful death on the torture stake, and his Father knew that. That is truly a loving act that Jehovah God showed towards each and every one of us and all mankind, isn't it? But you know, it took more than just this. See, Jehovah allowed this, but it took Jesus willingly to do it. See, God does not force anybody to serve him. He doesn't. Even his own Son. He wants you to serve him willingly. So how did Jesus feel about mankind? Well, let's find out. this sink in for a second. Jesus Christ, God's Son, truly values you. He sees you personally as a true friend to him. He willingly gave of his life for the repayment of what Adam had lost. Again, what an amazing love gesture this is to mankind, isn't it? But then you can ask, God is all powerful. Couldn't he just wipe everything clean in a second? Yeah, he could have easily. But why did Jesus have to die then? Well, God, Jehovah God, is a very just God. But you know he does something different than other rulers don't do? He applies that justice and righteousness right to himself. So God's standard of justice required that he not simply overlook our mistakes of mankind. He needed to do more. So then he provided the necessary legal means for our sin not to be only forgiven, but in the future, legally wiped out and eliminated. The ransom, Jesus sacrificing his perfect life, was that payment for what Adam had lost. It was a true legal basis. In a sense, when Jesus died, a perfect man, those funds we talked about, the retirement account, Jesus redeposited those funds again. Now they're sitting there for each and every one of us here tonight, for the near future, to start drawing off of. And we'll be able to draw off those forever. It will never end. But you know, Jesus' death did something else very important. Jesus' death also proved that a human can and will remain faithful to Jehovah God, even under severe tests and trials. And this was exactly what Satan the devil said would never happen. He taunted God and said, nobody will ever remain faithful to you. Well, you know what? Christ Jesus 100% proved Satan the devil a liar to me. Christ's ransom opens up the way to the fulfillment of God's purpose, that obedient humans in the Bible. Where is this paradise?
Okay, turn up the volume.
Well, you know, the Bible describes two destinies or hopes for mankind. The first hope, there is a limited number that are going to heaven. That's right. Once they die here on earth, they are resurrected to heaven. But what's this limited number we're talking about? Well, let's turn to Revelations 14:1. Here in the book of Revelations, it gives us an exact number that will go into heaven. And there it reads, then I saw and look, the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 that name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. Here in the scripture, the Lamb standing on Mount Zion representing Jesus Christ, and with him are the 144,000 who have been resurrected from the earth. What are these 144,000 going to be doing in heaven? Let's find out. Let's look up Revelations 5:10. There it says, and you made them to be a kingdom and priests to our God, and they are to rule as kings over the earth. So they are going to be with Jesus Christ, ruling over the earth, these 144,000. See, you can liken God's kingdom, his government, not like governments today, in that there is a fixed number of ones in the ruling party. You know, you can live in a country that has hundreds of millions of citizens, but only a fraction are the ones who actually make the laws and enforce the laws of the ruling party. The same way in God's kingdom government, there's 144,000 with Christ Jesus that will be doing this. See, the majority of ones here tonight and all over the world attending the Lord's evening meal, we do not have the heavenly home. That's okay. Jehovah holds out something amazing for us too. Most faithful humans talked about already. Why would you want to live on Earth? It's rough. Wars, death, sickness, everywhere you go. Even like we said, the paradise areas, there's problems. But you know, Jehovah God holds out some promises that will be coming very, very soon to us, to each and every one of his faithful servants. Let's find out what these are. Let's look up Isaiah 35, 5, and 6. Here it's going to give some details of what Jehovah God is going to do to help you personally and help the earth. There, 35, 5, and 6, it reads, "At that time, the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. At that time, the lame will leap like the deer, and the tongue of the speechless will shout for joy. For the waters will burst forth in wilderness, and streams in the desert plains." So let's break the scripture down a little bit. What's it telling us here? We'll start with, in the near future, if you wear glasses like this, you can throw them away.
Okay,
You
go
won't
ahead
need it.
and-
It says right there,
can grab
the
the phone now.
blind will have their eyes open.
Not your phone, that phone.
If you're wearing hearing aids, you can't hear well. Right there, it tells you you're going to have new ears. This is what Jehovah God's going to do for you. If you have aches, pains, arthritis, whatever that it is going on in your bodies, you are soon going to leap like the deer. What's this telling us? Very, very soon, Jehovah God is going to put our bodies back to perfection. You will not have any pain or sickness ever again. But Jehovah said he's going to do more here, even. Talked about waters will burst forth, and the desert plains will have water in them. Now think about that. If you've been around the desert for a while, what happens when you have a really, really good rainy season? Spring comes around, and the desert becomes alive, doesn't it? It blooms everywhere. Grass grows, flowers grow. But everything is the whole place, isn't it? Think about that. In the very near future, you'll be able to walk outside every day and see the true beauty of the desert and the whole earth. But you know, Jehovah God gives us a few other promises. He gives us something, he promises something to us physically now. It's something that many nowadays strive for. They will work not day and night to achieve this. And even when they get it, they still have to work day and night just to keep it. What are we talking about? Well, let's look up Isaiah 65, 21, and 22. And let's see a few more promises that Jehovah God holds out for you and I in the near future. And there it says, "They will build houses and live in them, and they will plant vineyards and eat the fruitage. They will not build for someone else to inhabit, nor will they plant for others to eat. For the days of my people will be like the days of a tree, and the work of their hands, my chosen ones, will enjoy to the full." So did you see that in the beginning? You are going to be able to build your own house. Remember, you're going to have a perfect body. Can you imagine building your own house for you and your family to enjoy? You don't have to sell it to anybody else. And you know what else? No mortgage, mortgage free. No interest rate. No taxes. No county assessment fees. This is your house that you've built. And you know what else you're going to get with that? You're going to be able to plant the best fruit trees, vineyards, vegetables, best food you've ever had in your life. And unlike what farmers have to do today, where they have to sell their crops to pay the mortgage, remember, there's no mortgage. This is your food to keep, to enjoy with your family. How amazing would that be? There's a bigger promise in the scripture also, though. One of the biggest ones here. It says, "My people will be like the days of a tree." You know, nowadays scientists can date back a tree that's still alive over 4,800 years. And they even think there's more. What's that showing us? That's showing us in the very near future that we will never die again. We have a perfect body. We'll be living in this amazing paradise forever. That is the rock solid promise from Jehovah God. You know, you think about it, isn't it ingrained in us to want to live on earth? You know, you could get a disease, and then the medicine or For the cure of the disease is more painful and suffering than the disease itself. Why do you do it though? Because you want to live. You want to live on earth. That is mankind's original purpose. While on earth, Jesus healed the sick and raised the dead. That was showing that he has the power from his Father to cure all sickness and to raise our dead loved ones in the very near future, where we'll actually be able to talk to them and see them again. And think about this. Why would Jesus raise somebody from the dead if they were supposedly somewhere better? He wouldn't, would he? Not at all. So whether we have the heavenly hope to live or the hope to live on earth, God views each of you individually as precious. He does not elevate one above the other. He loves all of you, and he sees all of you. See, we can all decide whether to become a member of God's family of faithful worshipers, but we cannot decide where we best serve Jehovah God. He decides that. So now here are the emblems. We've talked about where man came from, why we're in the plight we are, and what Jehovah God and Jesus have done to help cure all this and do away with all this in the very near future. But here, the emblems representing the bread, Jesus' body, and the wine, his blood. Who should partake of these tonight? Well, both those with the heavenly hope and those with the earthly hope benefit and need Jesus' sacrifice. We both need it equally. However, though, those with the earthly hope would not partake of these emblems tonight. Why not? Well, these emblems are only for, like we talked about the 144,000, only for the ones who are selected by Jehovah to be part of his heavenly government. In a sense, he's given them a covenant or a contract. And that's what that's there for. But now, how about us? And we're here. Well, think about this. It's kind of similar to what happens at a wedding. Now, at a wedding, it's only the bride and the groom that actually say all the vows to each other, right? But why we go to a wedding? It's a joyous occasion. We're there supporting the bride and the groom, aren't we? Even though we have no part in saying the vows. That's the same thing here tonight. We are supporting the few left on earth that will soon be resurrected to heaven. But even more importantly than that, we're supporting Jehovah God and Christ Jesus' arrangements to help all of mankind. So now, how does someone know if they have the heavenly calling, in a sense that they are supposed to go to heaven after they die? Well, it's by means of God's Holy Spirit. He anoints them as joint heirs of Christ. This makes them certain that they have the heavenly hope. Those anointed by Holy Spirit do not need anyone else to confirm their hope. In fact, if somebody would say, do I have the heavenly hope? You do not. That's how strong a conviction it is that Jehovah God puts in you. It is not up to us to decide, but it's up to Jehovah God. So to benefit from Jesus' sacrifice, though, like we talked about, faithful ones on the earth do not need to and would not partake of the emblems tonight. So now we're going to go ahead and have the ceremony of the Lord's evening meal. We're going to follow along the pattern that Jesus set over 2,000 years ago. To begin with, let's read 1 Corinthians 11:23 and 24. For I received from the Lord what I also handed on to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night on which he was going to be betrayed, took a loaf, and after giving thanks, he broke it and said, "This means my body, which in your behalf, keep doing this in remembrance of me." Jesus then used simple wheat, flour, and water, unleavened bread. What's that mean? Same thing we have here. Well, in Bible times, leaven meant sin. Jesus died a perfect man. And that's why we use just the simple ingredients here. Next, Jesus offered a prayer and he passed the bread to his 11 apostles. So now we'll ask if Brother McGee would please say a prayer over the bread, then it will be passed.
Grand and loving Heavenly Father Jehovah, we so humbly approach you at this special occasion to thank you so much for this wonderful ransom sacrifice that you gave. You gave your Son in our behalf so each of us can have reconciliation with you. We know he had such a horrible death on this earth, though it was completely something that he didn't deserve. He was perfect and he served you and fulfilled his purpose so faithfully. We know you too, you saw so much of what he was going through and the pain that you suffered when he gave his body in our behalf as well. So we appreciate and show our appreciation by being here to thank you so much for this opportunity to have this reconciliation. We know that Adam lost so much for us and we are in so much pain, but it was through this ransom sacrifice, through your Son giving his perfect body in our behalf, that we have such a wonderful hope for the future. We know that it's a corresponding ransom. You are such a God of mercy and kindness and love, but you're also a God of justice. So you required this sacrifice, and we are so grateful and thankful for you allowing us to be part of observing this now. Even though most of us are just observing and not partaking in this, it is so important to all of us that as we see this unleavened bread passed before us today, help us to meditate on and really think about what it means for us, that perfect body that your Son gave in our behalf so that we can have everlasting life, whether it be here on the earth or in heaven in the future. We all benefit so greatly from this wonderful ransom sacrifice. So now as we pay attention to and meditate on the observance of this and the passing of this bread, please help us to really show our gratefulness and our thankfulness, meditate on the importance of it and how much we love you, and thank you so much for this wonderful gift. So we now thank you for this and pray through your Son, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
I'm having an allergy. I can't be sitting on that hairy floor over there, you know. Can you hear it?
Oh, I know. It's just they can't hear you. They can't see you. We're seeing them on this now. Better. I figured it out. How to flip it sideways instead of just stretching it. And yeah, I just said a prayer for the offering.
So now let's look at 1 Corinthians 11:25 and see what Jesus did next. There it reads, "He did the same with the cup also, after they had the evening meal, saying, 'This cup means the new covenant by virtue of my blood. Keep doing this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me.'" The red wine sitting here at the table fittingly represents Jesus' literal blood. And it's by means of his blood we can gain the release through the ransom and the forgiveness of our sins. Now I'll invite up Brother Howitt, and he'll give the prayer over the wine.
Our gracious Father Jehovah, what a blessing it is to have be here this evening and to recognize your loyal love that you've always shown for your creation of mankind. We recognize your loyal love and Jesus' love for all of mankind by the arrangement that you made in behalf of us, that you offered your Holy Son as a ransom for the hope of everlasting life. We recognize, Father, that this wine here this evening is a symbol of Jesus' blood as a ransom price for us and for all that you have done for mankind to help us recognize the many painful things that you've seen and what you have gone through, but you are a joyful God and you know what the future holds for your creation. So we thank you for this memorial this evening. May we show our love and respect, and may your blessing be upon this wine and during this memorial this evening. So we ask for your Holy Spirit to be with all who are here this evening as we continue on in this program to show honor to you and to our King Jesus Christ. Pray this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
evening meal. But just for a few minutes, let's see what else we can do personally to show our true appreciation to Jehovah God and Jesus Christ for what they have done for us and the hope we have for an amazing future. To start with, let's look at 2 Corinthians 5:14 and 15. Here it's going to give us some instruction on how we should live our lives. It says there at 5:14 and 15, "For the love that Christ has compels us, because this is what we have concluded, that one man died for all, so then all had died. And he died for all, so that those who live should live no longer for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised up." So basically, the scripture right here is telling us we need to stop living our lives for ourselves, in a sense. It's not up for us to direct how we should do things, what path we should take. No, we need to live our lives the way that Jehovah God and Jesus Christ want us to do, and let them direct our lives. Those who truly love Jehovah God are compelled to imitate his son Christ Jesus' footsteps. We know we're imperfect. Jehovah God knows that, but he wants us to try the best we can. And we need to worship Jehovah God and only Jehovah God. We need to make sure we're not letting anything else in this world crowd out our worship for Jehovah God. And something else to remember, Jehovah God accepts all people from nations and countries and areas, but he does not accept all worship. There's only one true worship that Jehovah God accepts, and that's what he wants us to give him. How can we do this? One key way is we have trust in something, we need to build faith in it, don't we? John 17:3 tells us this means everlasting life. They're coming to know you, the only true God, the one whom you sent, Jesus Christ. We have to get to know Jehovah God. And this isn't a one and done thing. This goes on for the rest of our lives, forever, getting to know him. We need to draw close to Jehovah God. Also, like we mentioned, Jehovah God knows that we're imperfect. He knows that we're going to sin. But he knows if we sin, if it's because of our imperfection or it's because we want to. So we need to turn away from sinful habits and things to the best of our ability. And now, very soon, Jehovah God is going to wipe away all wickedness from this world. It will be like that paradise we talked about, those things you'll be able to enjoy. There will be no wicked ones and no wickedness ever again. But right now, action is needed on our part. We have to individually decide to serve Jehovah God the proper way and continue serving him. Not tomorrow, not a week from now, but action now, because this system of things is going away very soon. Remember, God wants to help you individually. He is reaching out his hand to you and saying, "Come with me, I will help you." One of the main ways we can get help from Jehovah God is through prayer. Talk to Jehovah. Open your heart up to him. Tell him what is causing you pain and suffering. When you do that, you'll feel relief, and Jehovah God will definitely help you personally. Also, tonight is a beautiful start. We want to be here for this occasion, but we also need to be here to attend the Christian meetings regularly. This is where Jehovah God feeds his faithful ones. See, many people can say, "I love God, I love Jesus," but those are just words. It's through our obedience we prove our true love to Jehovah God and Jesus Christ. So in the coming days, weeks, continue to reflect appreciatively on Jesus' sacrifice and what it meant to you and what it means to you. If you're new here tonight, please reach out to one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Ask them for help so you can understand what God's word says and how we should live our lives so you can enjoy those beautiful benefits in the near future. If this is your first meeting back and you haven't been here for a while, why are you here? You know why you're here? Because Jehovah God drew you here tonight. He is in a sense reaching out to you, grabbing hold of you and saying, please come back to me. I want to help you with anything you're dealing with. So please reach out to one of the brothers and ask them for help. And all of us need to continue doing our best in serving Jehovah God and showing our true appreciation for what Jehovah God and Christ Jesus have done for all mankind and for you personally.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brother Chatwin, for helping us to understand truly how special this memorial occasion is. So thank you once again. So let's read this announcement. We are very pleased that you arranged your affairs to be here this evening for the annual observance of the Lord's evening meal. If you would like someone to contact you to demonstrate a free personal Bible study, please speak to one of Jehovah's Witnesses. We warmly encourage you to join us at our 2 weekly meetings, which are held on Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. as well as Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. right here in this Kingdom Hall. In addition, we invite you to visit our website, jw.org. Bible-based content is available in over 1,000 languages. It discusses topics that appeal to married couples, parents, single ones, teenagers, young children, and all who want to learn about the Bible. So now that concludes our memorial occasion this evening. So we're going to stand and sing our concluding song, that's song number 18, entitled Grateful for the Ransom. And afterwards, we're going to invite back up Brother Chatwin to close with prayer. Once again, that's song number 18, Grateful for the Ransom.
At least I got it on your recording. It's not, it's only your voice. It's not picking up the sound. Hold on. Let's see if I can boost it.
Our loving Heavenly Father Jehovah, we come to you now tonight at the end of this special occasion, and we truly thank you so much for the privilege to be here, Father, to be able to observe this, and to see how you truly care and love for each one of us here tonight, Father. You've set things in motion, so very soon we'll be able to enjoy a beautiful earth, a beautiful life forever because of what your son Christ Jesus did. And we thank you for all these things, Jehovah. We know we live in hard times. We know things come up always, but you see this. You are always there to help us, protect us, and help us and pick us up when we fall. And we truly thank you for this, Jehovah. So we come to you now in your son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I'll take it off for him.
very outdated. Like they're not serving the people super well. So I joined because I thought that there was a chance that maybe we can improve this, that we could, take a look at the national debt and cut some things out that, definitely aren't required for the government to be spending money on. And I'm sure we'll go through some of those grants later. But I was really driven by the mission. I thought the mission was incredible. So I joined Doge because, I just love the idea. I love the idea of cutting money from the debt and setting our future generations up for success. Because, like, if this pattern continues, our money is just going to be inflated into, like continuously inflated into not mattering. And it felt like my representatives in Congress weren't doing anything about it. In fact, their only solution, it seems like, is to just spend more money. We have a problem. Okay, let's just throw money at it. And people that run companies know that this is a terrible way to run a company, but we think it's a completely acceptable way to run a country.
Yeah, and so you're a young man and you're looking at all this stuff similar to what I'm doing. I'm looking at this stuff, spending billions of dollars here, billions of dollars there. Meanwhile, debt's going up like crazy because I mean,
$100 million
$38
already.
trillion in national debt. And right now, our debt exceeds our GDP. And if we can't, if we have more debt than we have GDP, I think we have a problem.
Yeah. I'm more concerned about the growth and the lack of plan to top the growth, or to stop the growth, which just seems to be growing infinitely. Like the government just seems to be spending more and more and more and more money every single year. And it seems like no one's really concerned about this. They just kind of think it's like free money. But I think, maybe for our generation, but especially for the next generation, it's a very, very concerning pattern. It's kind of making America weaker. It's making our people weaker. It's making it harder for us to, do the things that our parents and our grandfathers were able to do very easily, or more easily, like buy a house or afford rent.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for people to understand how me and you became friends because I would go and made that video in Minnesota where I exposed all that fraud. And everyone was then talking about, oh, I got fraud here, fraud there. Fraud was everywhere.
Fraud is everywhere.
And
Yeah.
I said, whoa, this is kind of crazy. I think I just opened a can of worms. And everyone knew about the fraud because of people like you and Elon at Doge. But I don't think people had really seen it with their own eyes to see that people were receiving millions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars were going to these programs like the child care, the Medicare payments in Minnesota, the Medicaid, and just in Medicaid and Medicare in general, we start seeing all this fraud taking place.
I think like the scariest thing with the fraud is that it is so easy to find, which means that there's nobody checking. Because if there were people checking to make sure that our money was spent very carefully, it would be like really hard to go find fraud because all the low hanging fruit would be picked. You'd go to the Leering Center and they would probably have kids there. They would probably have, at least a show child.
Yeah, I think that was the shocking thing is we found out that these fraudsters aren't even trying to hide it because they've never actually been caught. Nobody
ever checks. Yeah, that's like the scariest thing. Like if people checked, obviously this, like, they couldn't get away with it like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so rampant.
It is so rampant. And one of the things, and this is how we got connected ultimately, was the HHS then comes out, they release all the data set for everyone. I'm like looking through this. I'm like, how do I go through this? After that, I went to California based off that data set you had helped me extract. And these fraudsters also weren't even trying to hide it. And basically, just between my conversation with you, I was able to realize, okay, this kid's super smart. We're in the same battle together. And if people like me and you, our generation, don't do anything, that's going to get worse and worse. Fraudsters are going to continue to steal millions of dollars and billions of dollars. And the thing with these fraudsters, a lot of these people are foreigners. And so they then send that money over to Somalia or to all these other countries. And that money never can get tracked back. So our dollars are just leaving the country. But if there can be somebody that stands in front of the fraudsters to stop the fraud, our generation might have a little bit more hope. And not just our generation, just American people in general. But if nobody does it, it's just going to continue to get worse and worse.
Yeah.
And so I was super impressed with and excited when we became friends because I was like, oh, here's somebody else who's in that same mission with me to actually make a difference. Because a lot of people complain, but nobody ever creates any sort of solution.
Yeah. I think the best thing that the government can do is to open source the data. So if the government continues to open source data around how we're actually spending the money, so people that are more well positioned, like, you know, you are a great example. You are someone who actually went to the places where we're spending all this money and confronted the people and got down to the truth. I think we just have to create more opportunities for that to happen. We have to continue to open source data. Um, the best way to treat any infection is to bring out the sun. So I think that's important that we bring out as much open source data as possible. So sunlight can play its role as the best disinfectant. So the first data set was with the professional and outpatient services. And so, I mean, that's an industry that's like super ripe for fraud because with a professional or outpatient service,
And explain what that is.
yeah, so it's not, it's not, for example, a hospital that you go into or, the doctor's office that you go into. These are services where, people come to you, and professional services are a little bit more vague in terms of domain and scope. So it's a little bit more, it has more ambiguity in terms of what it means. And as a result, in terms of how the billing codes can be charged. And it's much harder to, find fraud because when you are in one central place and you're in a hospital, the hospital has to spend a lot of money. There's a lot of people that work there, and it's very upfront. If there's a problem where there's bad data or there's any indication of fraud, maybe we're billing too many codes, and by the way, a code is like a specific service that's rendered. So the way that these programs are built is there's a code, and then typically under the code there's like a severity. It's basically, so there's like the upstream service, and then um, how much service actually had to be provided under that, and then the dollar amount that's charged, and also the amount of times that this code is charged. When we open source the data, it's very easy to determine like that the crazy things are happening, like that an outpatient service is doing thousands upon thousands of claims a day. So I think it's really important that we continue to open source that data.
Yeah, because that information is available, but if no one's really going investigating it, it just stays there. And that's why these fraudsters have been able to get away with this for so long. And I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but I went to California and did a video on the hospices and on all these other programs, and people will see it. These people aren't trying to hide it. They're driving around brand new BMWs. Some even had a Cybertruck. Others had Mercedes, and they are just defrauding us like none other because they have no one to fear. So if they do know that somebody's investigating this and looking into it, we will be able to stop the fraudsters. Like these fraudsters are going to have to get either more sophisticated or they're just going to give up. Because if someone's actually looking into their fraud and they've never actually had to hide it, they're going to either stop or they're going to go back to their country or go back to a different country.
We just need like 1,000 more Nick Shirleys. That's what we need, like one in every county, basically.
And more people with big balls, literally. Because it is scary going after these fraudsters.
I can imagine.
The Armenian, California, they're a bit upset. And when you started Expose Fraud and started working for Doge, and I'm sure just having your name tied to Elon Musk, people will start coming after you. Because what they did.
I agree, Nick. I agree 100%, man.
Person, when in reality, he was going in, doing.
Or they're finding another avenue
for the country.
Yeah.
But then people were starting to burn down his Teslas and go after his companies.
And let's say I hope they don't find another avenue.
Went down. And so you had a whole entire Democrat Party and all these radical leftists start coming after Elon Musk. That trickled down to you. And then when I started Expose Fraud too, I actually really wasn't that political before this. And I never had to ever make any statements online or use my X profile to say what I believed because I would just go do the videos and interview people. But then I had to because the left got so mad at me for exposing fraud, they put you. And so that's what I felt. And I'm sure that's why people like Elon Musk eventually had to get into politics when they're really just building companies and just trying to build a better future for the country, for themselves, and for humanity.
Politics is pretty ugly. It is a blood sport.
Because were you ever into politics before?
No, not a super political person.
Yeah, so I was more interested in how humans work and how certain things work. I was never too interested in right or left. But when the left comes at you so hard where they're literally calling for your death, I remember getting messages of people. I remember I specifically got one, and it was a photo of a guy in a ditch, and the message said that this was going to be me next on a certain date in April, and basically calling for my death, and people wanted to kill me for exposing the fraud.
I think that's just like the natural immune system response. I mean, when you have someone who is able to receive these benefits and they're able to drive around the BMWs and the Cybertrucks and the Mercedes, the end state of that is, well, they're going to fight to keep it, and they're going to fight, tooth and nail to continue to receive money that they're not necessarily owed, and that the American taxpayer is stuck paying. Because I mean, in the end state, that's what it is. It's our money. People will come at you hardcore, but I think the driving factor for me was there's so many obvious issues, that like the border, like we didn't have a lockdown border at all, and like there's just nobody taking the charge, for that just a few years ago. And so I think for me, what made it very obvious was like it just seemed like we had a very reasonable person in charge of, that could be in charge of the White House, which was, President Trump. And so that's why I also joined Doge, because like it felt like we were fighting for the right things, like the common sense things that should just be like known knowledge.
After speaking with you, I learned how to code a little bit. And this website right here that we created, I coded myself using the power of AI. And I have some other graphs right here. We have the national debt with inflation. And you can see right here, this is when in 2020 pandemic hits and the debt goes up like crazy, and the interest or inflation goes up to 8% in 2022. How does all this correlate?
Well, I mean, when we have more debt, the way that debt works is it's typically held in a bond. So you're going to front the government with some amount of money so it can pay now. And specifically, if we're to look at the balance sheet, we spend about 6 trillion a year, and we make about 4 trillion. So for the 2 trillion swing that we have, where we don't make enough money, we have to go borrow for it. So we have to go, source bonds. And the way that a bond works is when you buy a bond, you're providing the government with money, and then the government is, I mean, in the classical days, they would write you a piece of paper. It was really cool. I've seen a bunch of them hung up, especially with the war bonds. But the government then says, okay, over this time period, we're going to pay you back at this interest rate. That interest rate is pretty high, and it means that over time, I mean, we just continue to borrow and borrow and borrow more and more and more money, and the interest payments continue to stack and stack and stack. We will just, I mean, the only answer is we need more money supply. The government has to just procure more money, because otherwise we're going to be in a position where the government can't pay for anything. And so what is the reaction to that? Well, it means that the Fed is going to have to go print a bunch of new currency. And so an increase in the money supply,
Inflation.
the value of the dollar is going down. And it's not like a lot of people are, there's a lot of doomers over this topic, and they just think it's kind of a done topic. I mean, you look at this graph, it looks pretty scary. The inflation rate is getting pretty high. I mean, it's stabilizing now under President Trump, but as the debt continues into decades in the future, it's really something that we have to root out, and it's going to take a lot of time and hard work to get it done. But I think with the advent of AI and new technologies like AI, we're going to be able to start to offset some of this by basically growing much faster than our debt is growing as a GDP, which means that the government can ingress money at a much higher rate, because we're seeing this huge economic boom in AI. Like these AI companies are, creating massive valuations, and the promise is huge revenues in the future. And we have a lot of, we're having a lot of innovations in space as well. And I think we're actually at an unbelievably exciting time. And I think in the grand scheme of things, there's been no better time to be alive. But I do think that this is a problem that hits very close to home, and I think it's something worth solving.
And so from 10 years from now, if what you're saying about AI is true, do you think the debt will stabilize, or do you think it will continue? It's obviously going to continue to go up unless something drastic happens, but do you think it will slow down? For instance, do you think we'll see a time period like here in the 50s and 60s where it really doesn't increase by too much compared to what we're seeing from 2020 to 2026?
And yeah, and this will just continue to grow faster. Um, I
Do you
think
think the debt will continue to grow faster?
yeah, I think the debt will continue to grow faster, at least in the short term, for the next few years. I don't know how AI is going to play out. I think it could be very interesting where we might actually have meaningful debt reduction over time as the United States is able to make more money through taxes, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that just hinges on us expanding the economy. So the like money is just it's kind of a wrapper over the entire economic value. So if we maintain the United States has a constant economic value, but we are drastically increasing the money supply, then the mapping between money and economic value is going to decrease. But if we have to print more money to offset the debt, and our economy is really growing super, super quick because we have a lot of advantages in AI and space, for example, in robotics. I think robotics will also be something that's huge. Then we're going to drastically increase the size of the economy, hopefully more than what we have to decrease it by inflating the U.S. dollar. Um, so I think that it's probably the best solution towards moving forward and putting America on the right track.
Is focusing more on AI and robotics?
I think it's very important, yeah, for the national debt. I still think that it's very worth it to start to pursue this fraud, because if there's no one pursuing the fraud, even the fact that you are going out there and investigating it is a forcing function for it to start to curb. Because if you can do it and you can do the data, you can use the data and then anyone can use the data, then we've essentially democratized this process of going out and finding fraud. And that will make it at least less obvious. So I think we can meaningfully shrink the amount of fraud in the government, welfare systems.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about these data sets, something that was awesome about my videos, it made the government, it kind of refocused people back on the topic of fraud. And when the HHS, the Health and Human Services with CMS, Central for Medicaid, Medicare Services, I believe that's what it's called, they then release these data sets. People are able to go in and look at this fraud. And so we know that there's improper payments, and we'll get into that later. But so this is just an estimated federal improper payments that take place here in the United States. I would say this is even low, because this is saying for Medicare and Medicaid, it's around 100 billion. But we know in certain states,
it's a conservative number.
That's a very conservative number. We know in some states there's been over 100 billions in waste just in their
yeah, it's super scary. It's like, guys, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah, no, it really is, because I mean, a lot of these billings, for instance, if you look at it's called Medi-Cal in California. It's their form of Medicaid. They call it Medi-Cal. They're having these.
They call it Medi-Cal?
Yes, Medi-Cal.
I've never heard this. Medi-Cal. Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you said Medi-Cal.
Oh no, Medi-Cal. And they have these increases of billions of dollars a year, but they're not receiving millions of more people into their state. But yet they're receiving.
Yeah. I mean, people are just like they're just grifting off the system.
So they're grifting, and they're figuring out, oh, no one is actually ever checking this fraud.
Yeah, that's a pretty scary realization. I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to.
I mean, this is the improper payments, and we see it explode during.
Obviously, during COVID, because the SBA, for example, did a terrible job with a lot of the COVID payments, especially.
What's the SBA?
The Small Business Administration, especially during a couple of these years, where there just were no checks at all on who was receiving money, like not even the most basic checks of like if an SSN is real. And a lot of this comes down to just very obvious things that should be conducted. It's not necessarily anything crazy. You don't have to have like Albert Einstein come tell you that, the way that we're running this is very inefficient and also pretty irresponsible. A lot of this just comes down to just basic data checking. For example, with SBA payments, is the SSN on the requested SBA loan, because we had COVID loans during COVID for small businesses, is the SSN associated with that loan real or fake? Like, is the SSN like 9 ones? Is it someone who's dead? Is it someone who's under the age of like 13 years old? Is it someone who is, been dead for 150 years? And none of these checks are performed. And that's like the most basic check.
What do you know about Social Security fraud? Because there's a lot of dead people who are registered to vote. There's a lot of people who are dead who are still receiving Social Security. In California, I went and did a video on the voter rolls there, complete mess. You have people who are 125 who actually aren't 125 that are registered to vote. And so the information in these data sets, these databases, I think there has to be so many fraudulent people or people who actually don't even exist that are claiming some of this money, or just our money's getting sent out to these people who are literally dead.
I think there's two big components to this to think about. So, for example, with dead people, there is the component to which the government knows that they're dead. So, if Social Security knows that such and such person is dead, then they're able to, cut off the Social Security benefits. I think there's two big problems that could be affecting Social Security fraud. A is the reporting pipeline for the Social Security understanding whether someone is dead or not has big delays. So there is necessarily a delay between when you die and when Social Security knows you die, and it's typically done through like the funeral homes or the hospitals. But there's a lot of people that are left out that like they're dead, but the government doesn't know that they're dead, and so they're continuing to pay out benefits to people, or to maybe people's family members who are continuing to receive money from for their dead parent. But I think that's probably a small percentage of the fraud. I think what is most of the fraud is people using real Social Security numbers of dead people at other agencies to claim other benefits, but they're not checking if Social Security knows they're dead or not. I think that's the majority of the fraud. The majority of the fraud is happening because there's not enough coordination between Social Security and SNAP. Social Security and I think between Medicare and Medicaid is probably better. I don't know precisely, but a lot of this comes down to actually, the government knows that in one place that you're dead and that you shouldn't receive benefits, but then distributing that knowledge to the other agencies that you're dead. So I think that this is hard to detect, but I think this is in that case it's kind of rampant.
Well, so you're saying essentially that these people know that they're dead, but they never said they were dead to Social Security,
Yeah.
and they just continue to
So-
receive the benefits.
Like let's say you have a relative pass away and they pass away in the hospital. The hospital will then fax a record to Social Security saying, such and such person has passed away. But if there's a gap in the hospital reporting, or the person dies at home, or it can get really funky really quick. And so it's not guaranteed. When you die, you're not guaranteed to make the list. So I think that's another component of fraud that's happening.
So let's say you die at your house and no one ever reports that you died.
Yeah.
You could continue to receive the
Yeah,
benefits.
like your son or whatever. And this is unfortunately something that happens. Like people will just continue to receive their parents' benefits in their name, or their grandparents' benefits in their name after they've passed away. Or someone else will come and steal the money, Someone will pass away and then, they'll move the bank account over and they'll receive the Social Security benefits to their bank account.
So a lot of people are getting rich off of dead people, or a lot of U.S. tax dollars are going to dead people.
I don't know what the number would be. It would be very interesting to look at. I know, for example, with the SBA loans, they found a lot of dead people getting money just because they weren't checking with Social Security. Is this SSN affiliated with a dead person or not? Like there was no actual check occurring. And so, yeah, dead people are receiving money. It's just maybe not the way that people would expect.
It's crazy to think that we live in America, the most advanced country, some would say, yet we have these flaws in our databases and in our systems inside the government that can't just line up certain stuff where they can all come together and say, oh, this person's dead, we should cut off this benefit.
Just common sense stuff.
Common sense stuff. Like they can't align the two. Because you could be dead on one piece of information or one database, but maybe if it doesn't get aligned with the other one, you're still going to receive those benefits. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it's crazy.
That's kind of what's happening.
So it's crazy to think that they just can't merge those two and figure it out.
It is crazy, yeah. So I think a lot of this just comes down to just being disciplined about the basic checks that have to happen when the government is giving out money to the people. And I mean, let's take a step back. Like, how did we end up here? Why do we not have these basic checks?
Because this should really be zero. We should be able to know where every tax dollar goes.
Yeah.
But we're having
We should be
$200
filing audits.
billion. We shouldn't be having $200 billion of improper payments.
The reason why this is the case is the incentive structure is set up in government such that the worst thing that you can ever do is, upset someone. So, I mean, we can get into technology later and how the government is not serving its citizens with technology necessarily, but the government is set up such that we want to minimize complaints. So, if someone says that they're owed money, our default stance is okay, let's just give them the money, because the worst thing that the government can do in the current incentive structure is to, have someone who should be receiving benefits who is not. So they hyper optimize in the complete other direction and just, make the benefits open to everyone. So, I mean, obviously the answer is somewhere in the middle, but fundamentally, there's no, I mean, when you have a company, if you spend a lot of money and you're not making all that money, the company's going to go under. So there's a forcing function for you to reach profitability, because there's only a certain amount of time that, investors are going to lend you money for you to go build out your idea. But at some point they're going to say, hey, we're going to need to start making money here. But in the government, the people that work for the government have no such incentive, because the government always has to exist. And no matter how much the government spends, it's not affecting any of the people that work there. So let's say we were to go run a startup, the Leering startup, and we wanted to go, make money, let's say finding fraud. It is in our incentive structure to continue to find more fraud, because, we'll have some equity in the business, as many employees do in private companies, and we'll want to see that business flourish and make more money. And so we're going to start thinking about, okay, let's actually check the balance sheets, and let's check, our money in and our money out to make sure that, generally we're aligned towards profitability at some point in the future. But in the government, there's no such incentive that's forcing these financial decisions. If you go into the government and you save billions and millions of dollars, look at the output. The output is, they'll just come after you hardcore. You're not necessarily getting anything out of it. So you really just have to be super ideologically aligned to come do this, because the incentive structure is the other way around. It's actually just better to keep on spending more and more money. So I think that's the fundamental switch that we have to make in DC, to make this a reality.
Especially if they've been in politics their entire career.
They don't understand how money works, by the way. They don't understand how businesses work, and yet they're kind of running the biggest business in the world.
They are, and they're failing, like really bad. I mean, right now, our interest is more than the defense budget for the United States.
That's what's crazy.
So we're spending more money on our interest than we are to protect our country.
Yeah, it's super insane.
And that only started happening. That happened in 2024. We started spending more money on our interest than we did on our defense.
It's the trend that's going to continue at the current rate.
Other than what people like me and you are trying to do you feel like there's anyone else really in the floors of Congress or on Capitol Hill that are really trying to cut down on the fraud?
Fraud it's messy. It's sensitive. It's hard to do. It's, President Trump has done a great job with this. But we have this civil workforce, which is comprised of mostly great people that are here to serve their country, and typically they don't make that much money, so they're ideologically aligned and they want to serve the country. But there's a portion of these civil servants who actually they want to continue to spend the money with no end in sight, and they have some ulterior motives than serving our country.
And so when we're talking about people who are actually trying to do stuff to make a difference on this, who's doing the most?
I think the cabinet secretaries are doing a pretty good job of this. And I think it's in very marked contrast to the last administration. They all kind of have their own effort going on to continue the mission and continue the mantra of Doge, which is to make sure that our money is spent the right way. So I think the mission is continuing with them. But overall, if we grow the economy, we can grow ourselves out of this problem too. So I think it's a multifaceted solution. It's not just hardcore, drop the amount of money that we're spending. In DC, that's really hard, as we've learned, because there's a lot of people that have a lot of interest in that money. Cutting money is just not super popular in DC. So I think part of it goes down to cutting the obviously bad things, stopping the obvious fraud that we can find. And I think the best way to do that is continue to open source these data sets so that people like you can go out and actually look for fraud and like confront these people. It is just going to be great if we can have data sets where we can actually just see like where is our money being spent.
And
So
is that what Doge did? Essentially, is they opened up the data sets to you guys and said, all right, go find any form of waste and fraud.
yeah, and I think we want to open that up to the people.
And so let's talk a little bit about some of these Doge findings. I pulled these up. And one of them that really got my attention was $33 million for transgender monkey research. That was one. $20 million for a Sesame Street-style children's TV program in Iraq. Did you watch Sesame Street as a kid?
Not the Iraq version.
Me neither.
We should put it up on the screen. I wonder if it's any good.
$17 million for tax policy consulting in Liberia.
Sorry, tax what? Tax consulting?
Policy consulting. $6 million in promoting tourism in Egypt. $9 million in Central American gender consultants.
Gender consultants.
Yes, in Central America.
What is a gender consultant?
You tell me. And then a big one was $60 million in luxury hotels in New York City to house illegal migrants, diverting FEMA disaster relief funds. And so some of these findings that I have here, are they similar to what you found?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff we found was insane.
And how often were you finding stuff?
It was every day. I mean, it became kind of normal, Someone would say, we spent some crazy number on some crazy topic. It's like, oh, I guess it's kind of par for the course now. It was pretty insane what normalcy was.
And how many hours a day were you guys working?
Yeah, we're working super hard. Every day of the week, probably 13, 14 hours a day.
And how many of there were you?
I think the president said in total there's 100 people or so in Doge.
What role did Elon play in kind of mentoring you guys or teaching you guys how to go out and find this fraud?
I think Elon was a fantastic advisor.
And how's he kind of influenced you?
Well, I think Elon's been, a huge visionary, and I think the things that he's working on are extremely important to humanity. So I also always looked up to him as like an engineering leader. I think he's unbelievably competent at actually understanding the engineering, which I think people have a hard time understanding about him. People kind of think of Elon as, oh, he just finds good people and then the good people go and do all the work. And it's not necessarily the case. He's someone who kind of understands everything. Like there's whatever topic you bring up to him, he understands it. Whether it's web development or like something as low level as like, how does the CDN work?
And what's a CDN?
It's a content delivery network. And like he's familiar with the intricacies from like A to Z. I think he's very well read, and he's also done a lot of engineering. I think back at his very first company when my understanding was he was like showering at the YMCA or something. I actually read his book, and he was like programming he was reading directly from the TCP/IP port for the web server, and so like that's a pretty low level type of engineering, like reading from web server, implementing an HTTP spec, and then actually responding over it. Like that's pretty cool work to be doing, all that time ago. So I think he really understands technology very deeply, and that's something that I really respect about him.
What were some of your experiences with Elon, or some of those conversations?
I mean, the first time I met Elon, we were kind of just going around, and I was just like, oh, I'm just doing the website, and then, started to meet with him more often. Like my second time meeting him, it was like, two guys and him, and we walk in. He's got the shades. He's got the shades down on the windows, and he's like, "I like it dark."
Maybe that's where the dark mag comes from.
I think he had the dark mag hat on.
Can only imagine that you're 19 years old and you go into the room with them.
It's a little intimidating because you're sitting there in the chair, And you're like, okay, well, I've got to make sure that I, answer all these questions well, because I really want to impress this guy.
I'm sure he sees a lot of himself in you.
uh,
As
I
far
don't
as just, it's very hard to find young, ambitious people that are actually trying to make an impact. There's a lot of people who are trying to get rich, but there's not as many trying to make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing is trying to make the impact, and the other thing is actually making it. Like really making a big impact is super hard. It's taxing. Um, so I always really really respected Elon, and in many ways I kind of wanted to work on very similar things. I mean, I was very interested in Neuralink. I think SpaceX is obviously super cool. It's like, let's go make humanity multiplanetary. Um, I thought Tesla was super cool. Tesla.sexy. Let's go make the most epic cars ever. And there's a lot of people who are they're visionaries and they see new ways of things working. For example, the problem statement of gas cars are bad for the planet and fundamentally we're going to run out of oil at some point. Um, so what can we do to fix it? There's a lot of visionaries out there that suggest electric cars and that say, oh, electric cars are obviously the way, but it's an entirely different thing to actually engineer the electric car so people will buy it and you make it so unbelievably exciting that it's like the obvious choice over the gas car. And so that's what I really loved about him. Like, not only was he just like focused on the right thing, he was actually focused on it in a very practical manner. And I hadn't really seen that before. It's like the coolest mission in the most practical way. Um, like we're going to not only make the electric car, but we're going to make it so unbelievably good that it's like the obvious thing to buy.
Yeah, I think having practical missions while thinking unconventionally is the way to do things nowadays. Because we've seen people have these practical ideas, but they think conventionally and things just don't get done. And you have to be a little bit unconventional to
Yeah,
actually get
you've
things done.
certainly been pretty unconventional, and it's worked out super well.
Yeah, because I think people are sick of seeing people try and go do things the conventional way and it actually doesn't ever pan out to have any result. But when you're kind of a bit scrappy, I mean, I by no means am I nearly as smart as you, but I might have more street smarts than you. But you need both to be able to actually make a difference. And so that's one of the reasons why I was super interested when you started telling me about all this AI stuff and how you can go and find all this information, because it kind of helped me get that unconventional knowledge in a way, and or be able to use my like scrappiness and then also bring in that knowledge and think unconventionally as far as like, thinking differently about how you actually go about and
Yeah,
do your job and go out and make a difference. Because at the end of the day, if people don't actually try to have a positive impact on society or to leave the world a better place than where you find it, and nothing's ever going to get done. So when you have people like Elon, he's very unconventional. Trump is very unconventional as well.
definitely.
And you also work, and you also are currently still working for the government. And this idea of thinking unconventionally, would you say that's been something that's been to your benefit?
Yeah, I think
And like,
thinking unconventionally.
what were some of those things that you learned from Elon that you're now using in your life to you're 20 years old now to make you the person you're going to be when you're 40 years old? Because we still have a long time, which is kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. I don't know. It seems like time goes super fast, but I think the general things is the general thing is you've got to be brave, and you've got to be bold, and you've got to do things that matter to you. There's a lot of people that they're kind of unsure, and especially at our age, they don't really know what they want to do. They see AI, and AI is pretty scary because it has the capacity to take people's jobs, because it's fundamentally going to change how the workforce works, because it's a very efficient agent that's able to execute very well. But I think there's a lot of people that are forced down a specific path because they've seen that path work before for a long time. And there's now, I mean, I saw the study this morning that 25 to 35-year-olds are the most stressed people, specifically men, because they don't know how they're going to, quote unquote, make it like their dads and their grandfathers have made it and have helped actually establish a family. Um, I think fundamentally we're going to see, for example, the education system shift towards more practical learnings. I think AI is actually going to be an incredible thing for our generation, um, if we handle it the right way. So I think what's really important is AI is an unblock for us to think outside the box and expand what humans are able to work on. So right now we have a lot of, quote unquote magazine depth in specific topics. There's a lot of people that are working on hyper specific things
In the government right now.
just in the world, and
Mhm.
especially in America. And I think what will happen is AI will be able to create a lot of the depth that we see in a specific industry or with a specific job, and actually increase the breadth of jobs that humans are able to do and the breadth of tasks that we're able to take on. I think that's what's the most exciting thing. It's like there's so many problems that we haven't even started to work on yet, and AI will be the huge unlock for that.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, just this website alone that we're watching here on the screen was able to do this with a few prompts of AI. I could have never have made this,
It's pretty cool.
but with the power of AI, you're able to make this and be able to provide amazing visuals for people to see. That's something that you weren't able to do 5 years ago. This would have taken. How long would you think a website like this would have taken to make?
It probably would have taken, a college educated engineer like a couple hours, few hours.
Yeah,
Um,
and I was
now,
able to do this within
yeah,
a few minutes,
few prompts.
few prompts.
But I think there's definitely, if you look at it from the narrow perspective of I'm just going to compare my ability to execute versus AI's, you're going to be in a stressed position because you see AI and like AI is just getting better every day, every single day. It's not expensive and it's getting faster and faster. It's getting more accurate. But I think if you zoom out and you say, well, what do I actually want to accomplish in life? What are the goals I want to achieve? How do I want to make humanity better? And then you start to see AI as the tool to make that happen, then AI actually becomes super, super exciting.
And now, with your current role in the government, what is your current role,
I run engineering for National Design Studio.
and how much do you use AI?
AI is super important. Use it every day in all different kinds of ways. I think the models are getting really good. We can see the models are able to answer our questions at PhD level or beyond. So they're unbelievably capable. I think the big unlock that will happen with AI, and especially with our generation, is changing the context layer. When we talk to AI, we're explaining to it in sentences, and we're writing it all out. But when, for example, I'm talking to you, our communication is so much more than verbal. It's the eyes, it's the forehead, it's like where people are, their body language, how they're presented. And there's so much context loss that's happening in our interactions with AI. So I think the big unlock that will happen in the next few years will be the way that we interact with AI will fundamentally change. Instead of being a chat bar where you type in a question, I think it's going to be much more nuanced in its understanding of you and the problems that you're solving.
And as you're in charge of the national design, what does that mean?
Well, we have a kind of crazy goal, which is we want to modernize how people experience their government digitally.
Okay, so you're going in and you're making these websites or whatever you're doing to have a more functional design to them.
Yeah, to make it easier for everyday Americans to use. And we started off with like kind of these big things, Trump accounts, the new food pyramid, and TrumpRx. TrumpRx is an especially fun one. And these are products that are very big in their own right. For example, the new food pyramid is actually changing how kids eat in America, which I think is something that's really cool to be a part of, because it's actually taking the hardcore design and engineering that we do, and it's applying it to some practical real world benefit where now kids in America, and America's I think it's either the most obese nation or um, definitely up there on the list, to a place where we get to modernize how kids eat in schools, because that's the foundation of how people will eat in the future, is how they ate as kids. Um, there's a lot of research that confirms that. So I think it's unbelievably exciting to be working on these projects where there's so much tangible real world benefit. TrumpRx, we designed and engineered what I think is a beautiful website, and we had a lot of fun doing it, but it's actually resolved in very practical use cases. We've saved hundreds of millions of dollars on prescription costs for Americans, on fertility drugs, on weight loss drugs, A lot of drugs that weren't necessarily covered by insurance, and now they're much more accessible to the American people. And so, we get to express design and engineering and do incredible things for the White House. The White House has so many great initiatives going on. Like, not many people are aware of how cool the Trump account is. It is $1,000 that you get when your child is born. And over 18 years, you get to contribute to it every month or, whenever you please. And you get to see it grow over time. And if you put in, a few $100s a month, or even a year, by the time your kid turns 27, for example, that's enough to buy a house or, pay for college. So I think it's a unbelievably exciting initiative where we're actually setting Americans up for growth moving forward and to believe in the capitalist system and like see how it can actually work for them and the benefits of compounding and putting money away over time. And there's so many great initiatives that the president is doing like that. So we're trying to present those initiatives really well and have them adopted by people and have people understand just how powerful these initiatives are.
And you're heading the charge of all that,
Yeah, the engineering side of the house.
the engineering side.
It's been pretty fun.
So how many hours a day are you working?
Probably like 14.
Just on your computer, just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
typing away.
computer calls, etc.
Dang. And so did you ever see yourself getting into that? Because think about it. You're 20 years old. When you start making your first company when you're 15, and then you have multiple other jobs. You work at Neuralink. I mean, that's insane in itself, the technology that you were working on then. And then you work in Doge, and now you're the head of the national design,
Yeah,
which is that a new?
it's a new initiative set up by the president.
It's a new initiative. So they're trusting a 20-year-old to be in charge of this this new initiative. Did you ever imagine yourself to be in this position where you're at as a 20-year-old, where you're actually in charge of initiatives underneath the president?
No, not at all. I mean, this is the case for everyone on the team. Nobody on the team thought that they would be working for the government. Our creative director on the team, he lived in Kanye West's house and he, produced Donda with him. And that's not the kind of person that you typically see in the government that, is working on creative projects. And that is the case across the entire team. The entire team is, hungry and unbelievably talented. These are guys that, come straight from Silicon Valley, great jobs to come work here and serve their country. And it's because of the president that we have. Because of the president, we're able to actually make these experiences happen. We're able to launch Trumper X, which is due to the president's unbelievably hard work in negotiating the drug deals. And we're able to bring on some of the best talent in the world to come work on the design for it and how people will experience the product and the engineering for it too.
I think that kind of goes back to what we were talking about is having a practical mission and thinking unconventionally because the
Yes,
conventional
yeah.
routes weren't working. I mean, when have we actually seen anything really impactful take place in our country, except for the people who are thinking unconventionally? Like
Yeah.
Trump is very, very unconventional. Elon Musk is very unconventional. And you could say those are the two people who have made the most change, at least for the culture, I'd say, in a long time, culturally and politically. I mean, just as far as the AI, the technology, the cars, the technology in the space. I mean, Starlink in itself. I mean, if you were to do one of Elon Musk's missions, whether it be Tesla, Starlink, the Boring Company, I mean, that would be a feat for one person to
Yeah,
take
that
on.
would be unbelievably incredible. And
Just for one person, that'd be
Yeah.
unbelievably
Yeah.
incredible. And then with X as well. I mean, we haven't even talked about the power of X. But I do want to get back into talking about this national debt because, look, we've been in here for about an hour or so. We're already at $427 million. Just click the $428 million. At what point do we just become a society like Greece in Europe where everything just pretty much collapses and there's no hope?
There's a lot of doomers out there, and I am not one of them. I actually believe that we will be able to solve this problem over time, and I think that fundamentally there will be forcing functions that help ensure that we do. I do think that the problem is very concerning, but I think America is unbelievably resilient in a way that I don't think there's any other country like America. And so I think we will figure it out, and we have the most talented people here in America. And the most beautiful thing about America is people that have all different types of ideas can come, put them into play. So I think over time, our economy is going to grow much stronger and faster than a lot of other countries. Um, and so I think over time we will find an answer, and we will solve this problem. I wanted to be part of that solution.
What's been your experience, or what's your take on tariffs?
Well, tariffs create a forcing function for basically the manufacturing to be done in America. And I think it's also like, I mean, it's always thought of in the economic sense, and I think it should also be thought of in the national security sense. Fundamentally, what we are doing is we are decreasing our reliance on our nations by creating a forcing function for these companies to start manufacturing goods in America. And so, as a result of the tariffs, you've seen incredible investment in America that will pay off to a national security extent, because it means that we're less reliant on other countries for a lot of this critical technology that we use every day, like a lot of the technology that goes into your laptop or the TV screen or the GPUs that's powering the AI that you prompted to make this, for example. And so, if we're able to rely internally on that more, then we're going to be able to, be less controlled by external parties. And then there's the economic benefit of, companies just investing in America, in American manufacturing over time, which is, by the way, it's been a problem for a long time, because America traditionally, has not had the best manufacturing compared to China, because, we've allowed everything to be outsourced to China. Everything is made in China now. And I mean, that's only going to continue to get stronger and stronger, because the Chinese factories are getting more and more efficient, and they can make the goods at a lower and lower cost, while the American factories are starting to close. So like, tariffs are an unbelievably good answer to start solving it. I actually can't think of a better direct lever than a tariff. So I think all in all, it's a good economic strategy, especially for national security.
Yeah, and when you look at those charts that they presented when they were starting to talk about the tariffs, I mean, all these countries were really actually ripping us off,
Yeah,
but then we couldn't give them a reciprocal tariff.
yeah, that was kind of crazy.
I thought that was very, like, I don't want to say anti-American, but it was like, when you saw these other people go against Trump for these tariffs, I said, well, don't you want us to
Yeah.
be winning?
The American people
We were
were paying
literally
for it.
losing.
Like we were paying for, America to be kind of subservient to everyone else. And by the way, this is the same with NATO. For a long time, America has contributed a lot to NATO. And I think at one point it actually dwarfed the contributions that all of Europe was making. But it was at least much higher than Europe, both as a GDP percentage and as a raw dollar, amount. And NATO is mostly protecting Europe. And under this political administration, we were also able to, kind of balance how much each country was paying for NATO, and levy some of the pressure off of the American taxpayer for paying for European diplomatic security at a rate that Europe was not even paying for it. At one point, Europe was continuing to buy Russian oil, as America is putting in all this money to NATO to solidify NATO, so Europe feels protected against Russia. So that's another thing that has changed under this political administration, which has been very beneficial for foreign affairs.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of countries felt like they could just abuse us and take,
Yeah.
take, and there was never anyone to really stand in front of them.
And it's the same with the pharmaceutical drug costs in America. Fundamentally, America is subsidizing all of the drug costs for all these other countries. The reason why Europe has drug costs that are so inexpensive, insurance or not, and in many cases they have insurances provided by the state, is because America is paying so unbelievably much for drugs. We are overcharged. The president said over 1,000% on drug costs, and it's absolutely true. And another element of this is Trump RX and what the president has launched to start to address these concerns.
For instance, just Trump RX to get prescription drugs down. What was your experience like that, seeing how we were being ripped off just for prescription drugs?
I think it's a feeling every American has when they're told the story. It's infuriating.
Yeah, I mean, just think about everything going on, how much Americans are getting ripped off. if you look at just the fraud aspect, I mean, it's estimated that 3 to 7% of each and every single tax dollar goes towards fraud.
It's probably higher than that.
Probably higher than that.
I mean,
These prescription drugs, people are getting ripped off on those.
yeah,
Taxes obviously are a big one. Healthcare, extremely expensive for insurance. Property taxes are going up in certain states, like Minnesota, for instance. They needed money, so they started raising property taxes. And it seems like the solution for a lot of time for these people that have had their career in politics, they've actually never really stood against some of these fraudsters and these big industries. And Trump and Elon, Doge, they've actually had the guts to stand in front of them, going about doing things unconventionally.
yeah. I mean, a lot of this comes down to not having the guts. You're right. We've been ripped off everywhere. Internationally, we were ripped off with, how much we were being tariffed, with drug prices, with defense spending. Inside of this country, we've been ripped off with fraud, and it seems like there's one political party which just wants to continue to let this happen. They want to continue to, like the beautiful thing about Trump is he's a deal maker. He's willing to go to war for America. He's willing to go fight the prescription drug companies. He's willing to go levy tariffs on other countries. He's willing to go after the fraudsters. He's willing to put in people who are able to get down there on the ground floor, like Dr. Oz and his team. They're able to actually go find and detect and start to stop some of this fraud. And he's really been fighting super hard for the American people, and he's been getting attacked nonstop for it because a lot of these institutional machines, the propaganda machines that we have for the mainstream media, they are funded by a lot of this. A lot of this is very good for them. And the people who run these mainstream media companies, in no world would you want your kids to learn from them, or would you want to be like them. They're pretty scary, and in many cases they're like complete doomers. And so the institutional MSM complex has been that's why they've been attacking the administration so hard.
Well, the fraudsters can play the loudest, and then people also, a lot of people are just against innovation and against seeing positive outcomes. A lot of people are just jealous. They get angry when they start seeing somebody do better than them, or they have these weird initiatives where they want to see other people succeed more than others. And at the end of the day, it just needs to come down to, do we want to see America succeed, or do we want to see a foreign nation succeed, or do we want to see somebody else be better than us? I feel like a lot of times when I get on X and stuff, I'm like, oh, that's very obvious.
Yeah.
Who did not play competitive sports growing up? Who did not just want to destroy their enemy?
And those people are the people that run our country. They're like career policy people. They're not war fighters. At one point, this country was run by war fighters, and it looked very different.
And when you say that, are you saying people who literally fight wars, or people who are willing to go to battle if needed?
Yeah, people that are willing to go to battle. That is why America has existed, and why we, seceded from the British, and why we've grown into this unbelievably strong, free, prosperous country. And of course, it's not without its problems, but I mean, it's by far the best country that we have, and it's the best shot of freedom that we have across the world. If America is to fall, the other countries will, freedom is much more fragile than we think. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, democracy, like these are all fragile systems. And if America is not this strong force that's fighting for freedom and that's fighting for keeping things fair, like our State Department is doing a great job of this. I think it's definitely the best State Department we've seen, in our generation. They're fighting for freedom internationally. And if America is to fall and slip and not be that face of freedom, freedom will collapse in other countries very quickly. And it's already kind of starting in Europe.
Yeah, because if America doesn't succeed, where do we have to go? We're not
There's nowhere else.
We're not going to
Yeah.
go to Canada. We're not going to go to the UK. So if America doesn't stay what America is, we will have nowhere to go. And that's why it's important to actually stand up for things when you do see something wrong. Because if you don't, America will cease to exist.
Yeah. I mean, that's the most patriotic thing that you can do. Like the work you've been doing is super patriotic. It is hugely emblematic of the American spirit. It's like indomitable, I think this is wrong. I'm going to go, take a look. I'm going to go just bring my camera around and go to these places and just see what's going on.
Yeah, something that really upsets me is people who think that America needs to do things differently than they did in the past. Which, yes, things do need to be done different. But I'm saying, like, for instance, the idea of capitalism versus socialism. There's a reason why America became what it is in 250 years, and all these other countries had thousands of years to do it. And one of those things is like capitalism, for instance. It's because of our Christian values. It's not because of the values of some other foreign nation. It's because of the values of Christianity and of those Christians that built our country upon that. That's why it says, "In God we trust."
Yeah. I would argue that it's a rendition of emboldened British values. I mean, America was, our roots are, we share them with the British.
We were brought up with these Christian values where we try to do everything good faith.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing that our good faith has been abused by so many people that's why we're in some of these problems where we're in, because our good faith has let bad people get inside and exploit our good faith. And that's why you're seeing so many of these horrific things take place in America, because those people who do not have those same ideologies of our founding fathers and the same belief systems, they are the ones who don't care to hurt America or hurt our belief systems for their own. They're not playing on the same playing field. We're playing on good faith. They're not. So they're able to come in and abuse the system. They're able to come and reap all the benefits of being in America without actually having to do the part of being an American.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about.
Just think about all these foreigners that came into the country. Let's just say when we're talking about fraud and we're talking about waste, think about what happened when Joe Biden opened up the borders, sent in millions of people. These people don't even speak English. And then they come and they become victims of the government because they become reliant upon the government, which means they become reliant upon our dollars. And who's paying for that? Americans. It's not the person who came across the border. They're not paying for it. They actually are not even incentivized to even learn English because they can just keep getting money from the government if they do stay on these programs that they're putting them on. That's why in Minnesota, 81% of the Somali population remains on welfare, because they actually don't have to do anything if they stay on welfare. They don't have to go and work as hard as a person who's not living on welfare,
Yeah.
because they've learned to live comfortable lives within that system that we pay for. And they don't actually care about going out and becoming that American patriot that gives their family the best life possible, because through hard work, they want to have a good life for their family, but they don't have to do it necessarily by playing the same rules as everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting because we have a lot of people that will come here and they will hate upon America, but they won't go back to, wherever they came from.
Like, when have you ever heard Americans say, I'm going to move to Somalia because there's so many good benefits there?
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
Like, when have you ever heard an American say, I'm going to move to the Middle East, if it's not Dubai, Saudi Arabia, or Qatar?
Unless there's some other factor that's pulling them there, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, there's no one does that. No one says, I want to go move to Afghanistan. But
Yeah.
but it's our responsibility to accept them all. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And it was funny when
It's pretty fucked up.
when the United States went to when we just entered into the war with Iran. It was funny because the countries that were supporting America that came out saying, okay, we're supporting them, was like Saudi Arabia and like these other Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and the ones that were against them, you saw like France and the UK speak out against America, because I think America knows like kind of what we're against, but then you see these other countries
Yeah.
who are then supporting them, like France and the UK, like condemning the United States. It's just interesting seeing how a lot of people have gotten to the point where they've become more sympathetic, which has diluted their culture. It has taken what made their countries great, and they've just accepted it.
I think
Like, good faith in the Western world has
it's plummeted.
plummeted
Yeah.
society.
Our generation has a chance to fix this. And I think people like you, especially, who are brave and willing to see outside the box and willing to see these problems. Like, this is super important for young Americans to see. There's a contingent of young Americans who know that this is a problem. They understand that, you know, there's a series of what seems like obviously wrong things, but society is dictating upon them, especially in college campuses, for example, that they can't talk about it, that they just have to accept it, and they just have to move on. I think what's so special about this new generation is we're kind of seeing some rejection of that idea and some re-questioning of the belief system. Why do I believe this? Who taught me to believe it? And I mean, what is obviously right and what is obviously wrong? And I think the bravery that you have going into these, you know, encounters, and I know people always see the polished version of it where you've got the 1 minute clip on Instagram or YouTube, and it's pretty cool, and it shows like some absurdity about how bad the fraud is or how a dog is able to register to vote. You don't have to tell me that story, by the way. But they're not seeing there's a huge back end process to it of you going out and finding it, and then you going up and asking them questions and being brave enough to do that. And I think we need more Americans who are willing to stand up and say, hey, you know, this is a problem. This shouldn't be the way that we do this, and stand up for what they believe in. In life, I think that's all we kind of have is what do we believe in and what are we willing to fight for? What are we willing to make sacrifices for? And I think that's the way to fundamentally escape nihilism is fighting for the causes that you believe in. And I think that's why a lot of American men are very disenfranchised and they're very anxious and they're very nervous moving forward. It's because we've had these systems imposed upon us and we've never really considered from first principles whether they are the right systems. Like it is so obviously wrong that DEI exists. Like when it was, I mean, the right term is DEIA, which is indicative that everyone is kind of on a level playing field where your skin color doesn't matter, and if you're in a wheelchair, it doesn't matter, and if you have some other disability, it doesn't matter, and like that is the right form of it. It's like no matter who you are in America, you have a chance to come here and win. But we've actually transitioned this model to a model of equity, which just means that we're going to, instead of curving the incomes so we give people an equal chance to win, we're going to curve the outcomes. And this is what the political left has been all about, where we are actually just going to villainize people who are successful, and we're going to prop up people based on their race, and they drop the accessibility component of it, which just shows how, you know, disingenuous they actually are. And that's obviously racism. It is obviously racism against white people. Um, like that is just one example of how, you know, young men have been disenfranchised in our society. You know, white men in particular have been completely villainized in society, and we've kind of, you know, sit back, and our older generations have kind of just let it happen. And you know, it's because, I mean, we could get into this at a deeper level, but I think fundamentally what is important for every American to do, regardless of, you know, male, female, what they look like, none of that matters, is to stand up for what you believe in and say that this is the thing that I think is right, this is the thing that I think is wrong, and I'm willing to go, you know, to ideological war over it. And I just think that we've seen like this mass indoctrination of kids in schools that has been hugely harmful.
Mm-hmm. I think we're starting to see that shift a little bit. And I would say it's because of platforms like X, because you're actually able to fight back and not get deplatformed.
Yeah.
Because think about for how long
they were controlling the conversation. You literally couldn't criticize these people. Like this is still happening in the UK. X exists in the US, which has been unbelievably helpful. But in the UK, if you criticize, you know, mass immigration, for example, they put you in jail. It's unbelievably messed up. You know, I do agree that there is speech that, you know, could theoretically be harmful, but our cost to litigating that kind of free speech aspect, where we are going beyond, you know, making direct threats on someone's life and into, you know, derogatory or racist statements or whatever, when the government gets into litigating that, it gets so unbelievably ugly, and it's just I mean, it's immediately evident that it was not worth it.
White hate is very much real, and you're seeing it. A lot of people speak out about it, and then it seems like really white hate is like, for instance, if you were to say all lives matter when Black Lives Matter was popular, that was, you were going to be called a racist. They were essentially going to say, they were saying that all lives didn't matter. And I've been to a few protests where they've said, well, say Black Lives Matter. I'll say, okay, Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. And I've been bombarded by people. I've been able to experience this change in humanity where these radical ideas have actually radicalized a small portion of the population.
They're very loud, by the way.
They're very
It
loud.
makes them sound like, you know, the 10% of the population is like, you know, 65% of the population, especially in some circumstances.
But think about it, even if it's 1 million here inside the United States, that's 3 million people. That's a lot of people. That's more than some countries. So you have 3 million radicalized people. That's about the size of El Salvador.
yeah.
You have a small country of people who hate America, who are
Yeah,
more
I think
open
you're
to
right.
being louder than the 99%.
They hate America. They just don't want to, like, a lot of these people just don't want to see America win. I think the only way that we move past this is we stop talking about race. We stop describing people as who they look like, and you know, like male, female, skin color. Like none of that matters. The axiomatically, the American dream is that anyone can come here and have unconventional ideas and put them into play. And sometimes it doesn't work. And America is, by the way, the best place for trying these things out, especially with companies. It has the best, you know, place. It's the best place to start a company in the world, because if you fail in America and you know, rack up debt and your business goes under, we are forgiving. We allow people to continue to iterate and improve. Um, and the only way that you have great ideas survive over a long period of time is by allowing all ideas to, you know, step into the battlefield and see who wins. Um, so America is the best place to you know, discover what those ideas should be, and you know, battle them out.
I agree, and that's why we've been able to get to where we are in 250 years, and no other country has been able to, because here you can do so much. So it makes me really mad when I see other people get mad at people for trying to do things. I mean, I have a lot of friends, but I don't know if I have a lot of friends who are willing to step out of their comfort zone and go try what they really want to try because they're scared of.
Yeah, and it's even stuff as simple as that. It's not necessarily political. It's also, well, what do you want to do with your life? What interests you? Oh, you know, I really love architecture, and I really want to get into architecture. And, you know, my parents really want me to pursue this degree in some other field, let's say. Like, I think what's really important for people of our generation, especially as AI comes around, is you should do what you love, what makes sense to you, because AI will be a great unlocking force for visionaries. And I think it's going to allow so much larger of a contingent of the population to become visionaries and to become, you know, to invent new things and build new things. Instead of having so much talent stacked in just one field, we're going to be able to spread that out across America and grow at a rate that's never been seen before.
Mm-hmm. And we'll actually be able to have innovation, actually be able to see different ideas and other things prosper than the conventional ways.
Yeah.
Because, like we've said it multiple times, the people that are actually getting stuff done are the ones who think unconventionally.
Yeah, there's some conventional things which are, you know, it's not good to be 100% unconventional or 100% conventional. There's some nuance in it. But I think everyone, they kind of know inside their heart where they stand and what they want to do. And I think it's very important that you pursue that. You know, in my specific case, I dropped out of college a semester in, and I, you know, worked for Neuralink at a high school. And I didn't do that because I really wanted to go work for Neuralink and I wanted to say that I went, you know, to go work for Neuralink because it's preppy. I did it because I loved just working with computers. It just spoke to me. And when I started, you know, I didn't have any expectation. I didn't think that I was, you know, going to be able to be in this position that I am now. And I'm sure it's the same for you when you started making YouTube videos and you started recording. I'm sure, you know, maybe you saw it at some point, but when you're just starting off, you're like, you know, you're all the way down at the base of the mountain. You can't even see the top yet. You don't even know what lies ahead. And you've been extraordinarily successful by just, you know, continuing to do what you love.
Yeah, I think it also has a lot to do with listening to your thoughts and listening to your instincts and going through with that. And so when we say we are in debt, who are we in debt to?
Whoever buys our bonds.
Because right here I have it says $24.4 trillion in private investors,
Yep.
$1.1 trillion to Japan, $800 billion to the United Kingdom, $756 billion to China,
It's
and
a lot of money.
$2.7 trillion in Social Security trust funds.
Well, the trust fund is not in itself a debt. It's just money that's, being lent to the Treasury, basically, because we invest the Social Security trust fund in these bonds. And so when we think about who owns the bonds, American banks own bonds, and they'll trade bonds at different, bonds that are exchanged at different rates. A lot of people will put their money in bonds because it's guaranteed growth, because the government is always going to pay you out. It's like 100% guaranteed that when you put money into the government, lend the government $1,000. In 2 years, they agree to give you back $1,050, and for sure that you're going to get $1,050. It's a very safe investment vehicle. And there's also these international investors which own our bonds, and there's governments that own our bonds too. And for example, especially because of the currency exchange market. So I mean, it's an intricate issue, but a lot of America owns a lot of its own debt. Like the private industry in America owns a lot of public debt.
If you do buy a bond, you're almost guaranteed, you are guaranteed to get that money back.
Yeah, that's why it's so
been.
safe. It's like the safest option, because you invest your money in the S&P 500, it's probably going to go up. Statistically it goes up 10% year over year, but it's not guaranteed. The great thing with a bond is it's guaranteed. So when we think about how the debt will progress over time and how this chart will continue to progress as we have more interest payments.
Like in the future, do you think that it keeps going up at this rate, or do you think it levels out or goes down a little bit?
I think
the slope.
It will continue to go up this rate for a while, because what will happen is we will continue to have more money that we have to pay interest on. So our interest payment will continue to exceed. We already saw the interest payment compared to the national defense budget.
Because I think this is when I was talking with you, and you really made it make sense for me how bad this debt is. Because if we can't ever pay back on our interest, that's when America goes bankrupt.
Yeah, like once the interest will continue to grow, which means that we will have even less money to spend. So, I mean, let's think about this, for example, with the 4 and 6 number that I brought up earlier. The American government makes $4 trillion a year and needs to spend 6. And so let's say that 6 is all new money. It's all new contracts for the year. It's all the mandatory spending. It's all the Medicare, Medicaid, all the Social Security benefits that are going out for that year. So if we make 4 trillion and we spend 6, then we have to borrow 2 trillion every year. And that's what we've seen happen. But as we start to borrow more and more money, we're going to have to start spending more and more money just on maintaining that debt. So instead of having 4 trillion that's going to go towards 6 trillion that we're spending, it's going to be 3 trillion going towards 7 trillion that we're spending. So we're going to continue to widen the gap on both sides, because the government is going to continue to spend more money in a discretionary and mandatory sense, and we're going to continue to have less money to pay it off on. So the gap is going to continue to widen.
And when we're paying money in interest, we're not getting anything out of it.
Yeah, it's literally just servicing the debt. Like all of this money, this $1.2 trillion is not going to anything but servicing debt. There's no new net outcome as a result of these dollars. It is just us being not disciplined with our money in the past. It's kind of like having insane credit card debt.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh boy, I bought that a long time ago, but now I have to pay way more for it in the present.
Yes. Yeah, because it's really is just interest for people to understand, like this money, that $1.2 trillion, it's not going to benefit America in any way.
Yeah, and that number is going to continue to grow. At some point, it's going to be double the defense budget.
So for somebody watching this, to think about it like a credit card. When you're paying interest on your credit card,
yeah,
you're actually not getting more clothes when you pay that interest.
Yeah,
it's literally going just back to the bank.
But Congress still thinks that the credit card gives you free money. It's like, oh, I don't have to pay it off right away. It's just the bank's money. Let's just go spend more and more.
And I feel like a problem with this is it's been going on for so long that when you say the word $1 billion, people don't understand how much money that is. People can't actually conceptualize how much money $1 billion is. I mean,
$1 billion
$1 million is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But $1 billion, That's 1,000 millions. But people can't think about, like, physically can't comprehend how much money that is.
Yes, it's so much money. Now think about a trillion. Like that is it is the number like doesn't even make sense. It's like the number is that high. What?
And that's how much we have to put out every single year.
It kind of sounds fake. It's like we pay $1 trillion. It sounds like I'm exaggerating a ton, because $1 trillion is just such a huge order of magnitude.
And did you know that the last time we were actually in a surplus was 2001? Ever
time
since
ago.
2001, we've been in a deficit. But what's interesting about that as well is if you look at this graph right here, is you can look at debt added by presidents, and really there wasn't that huge increase in debt until we did start going into wars after 9/11. That's when you saw a drastic spike in debt, and then it's continued year over year. And who knows what would have happened if we didn't have the pandemic? That it looked like we were doing pretty well. Then we ended up putting another at least 3 trillion. I think Trump put in 2 trillion, and then Biden also put in about another 2 trillion or so. I think it averaged out around 5 trillion between the two. And then you had Ukraine aid and the Ukraine war that we were paying for, and then we also had the migrant crisis underneath Biden,
Yeah.
and we had rapid inflation of 8%, and when we were just at 1% before the pandemic, which is crazy. 2%.
This is what happens when the government prints a lot of money.
Is our dollars go down. And why I think this is so important is because if you look at our generation, we're right here, and our dollar essentially is a lot less valued. But that money that also came in during those Biden and Trump years during the pandemic, a lot of that money got back into the hands of people through stimulus checks, and then it ended up going back into people who had stocks.
Yeah.
And so it created like this big divide where the people who were in the markets made a lot of money, but people like me and you, we weren't really old enough to be in the markets. And if we were, we didn't have hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to make money off of those profits. And so we really did get the short end of the stick as far as the people that are going to be able to buy the homes and be able to have those same opportunities that our grandparents had. Because a lot of, if you look at this graph of the debt, it's not too far off from.
It's pretty scary.
It's pretty scary, but also like the S&P and stuff has gone up a lot too since over the years.
It just hasn't been growing enough yet.
Yes, but what I'm trying to get to is the people that had their money in the markets, they got all the benefits of having their money in the market, but they got the benefits of making the money off of the money that got poured into the economy. But if you didn't have your money in the market, and if you're just starting off like we were and like we are, we're at a big disadvantage. And so that's why we really do need to fight against fraud and do everything we can to keep our dollar valuable.
Yes, yeah.
But if we don't get in control, our dollar will go to nothing, and we'll be like people in Argentina, where their dollar's like worth nothing pretty much. We won't ever get to that point, but that's kind of thinking very drastically. But our dollar will go less and less.
Yeah, I mean, we do need to fight the war on both ends here. We have to try to decrease the amount of money that the government will spend, and we also have to create enough economic growth. And President Trump's been doing a great job of this. With the tariffs, we're bringing in a lot of the growth here in America, which is very important over the long tail. It's a long-term investment in America, and with the advent of AI and of artificial of robotics, I think we're really going to be like this is a solvable crisis. We need more bold entrepreneurs and founders.
Yeah, I agree, but we did get royally effed right here. I mean, look at that.
Yeah,
that's like a straight line.
Yeah, I mean, everyone felt the Biden inflation.
Yes, everyone did feel it, but we're the ones who aren't going to be able to experience those same experiences our parents and grandparents had because they didn't have to go through this.
I think over time, the AI is going to unlock a lot of economic potential, and just as virtue of us being able to expand the dimensionality of human activity over time, if America plays this out right and America continues its dominance in AI, which it's pretty well poised to do, then I think we're going to be in a position where actually we will have our next generation could be the best generation. We could set up our kids for the most amount of success. But we do need to solve these problems. Like they are pressing. Like this national debt is a very scary graph, and this spike, like if this continues to increase, we are not going to be in a good spot.
Not at all. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, oh, why did everything go up so much? And it made me think like, oh, well, the economy got flooded with money.
Yeah.
And so people who had their money in the markets were able to go buy the houses, and the interest rates were a lot lower on houses at that time.
By the way, that's also a problem. I mean, the president is working on this, but the interest rates are still high.
Yes, so they're still high, but those people who were able to buy the houses with, I heard that when Trump was in his first term, people were buying houses at 2% interest rate. And so now these people were able to buy these houses, have small mortgages, and now when they want to go sell their house, they're not going to sell their house for, they don't want to sell for less than what they bought it for. And so then we're the ones who get stuck with that price tag.
And also we have private companies going out and buying up housing, making a lot of money on that kind of investment. But it is harming the American people because it means that, fundamentally we have less housing supply because these, companies are going at it and buying the housing, and it makes it harder to raise a family in America. I think, the president's doing a good job of this, and we have to continue to make it as easy as possible for Americans to have kids and start families. It's so unbelievably important. And we have to continue to set up America for success in the future. And that's only happening through thinking like conventionally, as you said.
And yeah, I just think it's so crazy to think about all the stuff that's going on. It's like, well, if no one gets this under control, or people don't speak out about it, or if people don't actually learn about it, they're not going to know how to play the game, because you have to be able to play the game.
Yeah.
If you want to reap the benefits of the game. But if you don't play the game, you're going to get screwed.
Speaking of playing the game, I'm curious what insights you have from doing this for a few years. You've really stuck with this, with, being on YouTube, and you've done a great job with it.
Well, I think nowadays, if you want to be a part of the game, you have to think unconventionally. You have to also think how people are making their money these days. They're not making their money by going to college. 51% of kids who go to college actually are saying their degree wasn't worth it, and they're actually not able to go get
because they're not able to get the jobs that you were able to get with a degree before, because degrees have inflated a ton too. And value is drastically decreased.
Yes, and they're extremely expensive. So
a
lot of these kids are starting their life behind the starting line. And just to get to the starting line, they have to fight through $50,000 of student loan debt.
It's crazy.
And so if you are going to go to school, you have to make sure it's worth it. But if you aren't, you do need to think a little bit unconventional and think about how you can go out and make that money, whether it be through sales or providing a certain service or trying to build something.
It's probably never been easier to not go to school in terms of the opportunities that still lie out there for you.
100%. And so like if I wasn't doing YouTube and doing what I'm doing now, I'd be doing everything I could to, one, learn about AI, but then to be providing some sort of service where you could then sell that service for $100, and your goal is to go sell it to 100 people that month, so that way you can make $10,000. So that's kind of where I'd start thinking about, okay, how many things do I need to sell?
How can I leverage AI to help?
Yes. And how can you expand your reach?
Yeah.
And I think it's extremely important for everyone to have either use social media or don't use it. Use social media only if you're going to use it for your benefit. But if you're just going to use it to consume, don't use it. Good point. Because it will take up hours of your days. But if you're making money off social media, great. Or if you're using that to network, amazing.
It's crazy how much you can achieve.
Don't use it.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's a great point. It's crazy how much you can achieve by just being focused. A lot of people just, they can't focus anymore. They can't sit down and focus on a problem or a topic for multiple hours at a time. They're too distracted. And I think if you're able to also develop your sense of focus, you'll be in a great position to win too.
Yes, and I think a lot of people think they need to have all the knowledge, or they need to be perfect.
It's a big trap. Yeah,
it's a big trap. I mean, to this day, I'm still messing up on words. I can't pronounce all my words correctly. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I got a bit of a speech
Dude,
problem.
you're not the only one.
So, but it's that's a thing where people need to realize that, like, yeah, you're not gonna be perfect at everything, but you have to go out and at least try.
Yeah.
And then you need to encourage those people who are trying. Nothing I hate more than seeing somebody go out and do something and then people beating them down for actually trying to do something. I think that's what the internet is. It's a lot of complainers who don't ever come up with solutions.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
And so if you sit on the internet all day, you're going to think the world's bad because it's just a bunch of complainers.
Become a doomer. Yeah.
You're going to become a doomer, but you need to be hanging out with the doers.
You have to resist being a doomer. Do not allow yourself to become a doomer.
Amen. Aside from what you're currently working on with the national design, what else are you working on?
We're also working on freedom, trying to bring free speech to Europe. And that's going to be something that's interesting to talk about in a short amount of time. We have a lot of other projects on deck. Continuing to expand TrumpRX, I think, is going to be a big one. Continuing to expand the Trump accounts and what it means to have a Trump account and how easy it is to use. I really just think that there's a lot of value to be derived from making experiences easier for everyday Americans. And I think when you make experiences easier for Americans and you make them less complicated and you make them more streamlined, then it's also easier to root out fraud, especially fraud that's happening of people. There's a lot of people who are having their Social Security benefits defrauded. And I think that simple interfaces go a long way towards that too, and reducing the amount of money that the government spends on technology, which is an unbelievably high number. It's, if we were to sit down and look at some of these contracts, we would be in a state of shock, especially, all the people that actually work in these industries, that the government spends so much money for such basic services. I think this is it's a pretty good path forward to try to continue to ensure the prosperity of America. And yeah, I'm unbelievably excited for what AI can do for Americans as well. I think it's going to be unbelievably exciting. There's going to be a bit of a transitory period because the workforce is going to fundamentally shift, but long tail, it's going to, I think, have really profound, impact. And we're going to start looking at things in terms of like pre-AI and post-AI, much like we did, when manufacturing, started to kick up and we were able to mass manufacture cars, for example. And now we all drive around cars and it's the default mode of transport. I think it's going to be much more profound than even that.
And what percentage of the federal government do you think could be cut and still be ran efficiently?
Great question. It's really, really good question. I guess we just have to determine the bounds of what is efficient. Like, what does the government actually have to do, and what does it have to provide its citizens? And everyone kind of has like a little bit of a different answer. I think my answer somewhere lies in the bounds of the government should do the things that it is in a very unique position to do. So I think when we look at it from that perspective, the government shouldn't do things that private industry is capable of doing necessarily, except for some limited circumstances, and should only do the things that the government is in a unique set of circumstances to actually execute upon. I think you could probably, like, if we were just looking at a number of agencies, we have 400 agencies or something. I mean, if we were to list them, I couldn't list, a small percentage of that. There's a lot of agencies that don't need to exist, that can be deleted. Things that are not serving our country, they're not providing us value, but they're spending our money. And they're, contradictory to American values. And there's a lot of small agencies that exist like that. And there's a lot of institutional, waste, fraud, and abuse that has been piled up over the years. And the clearest litmus test for that there is so much piled up is because when you go and you analyze data that's already public, this is already in the public domain, you can find fraud everywhere, which means that there's nobody checking for fraud. So I think, in terms of solving fraud in the future and how we actually get ourselves out of this mess, the best way forward is to continue to open source data. Open source, anonymized data that allow us to democratize the finding of fraud, because there's a lot of people that are in specific circumstances where they would know something about the fraud that the government doesn't know. Oh, I live next to this health center and I never see anyone come in or out, but I can see that they're processing 1,000 claims a day somehow. like that's the kind of data access that we need, and it's going to make it like if we bring the sunlight to all these government programs, we're able to, just show how the money is being spent in a way that's responsible. Then over time, we're going to be able to continue to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And if, God forbid, a president that is not as strong as President Trump is now comes into office, and there's a lot of rampant fraud and abuse that starts to pile up as a result, then we will be able to easily detect that if we have open source data. So I think it's just very important that the government brings the data to everyone, and it publishes open source data on a timely manner. Like if we could publish open source data every year or every month, and it's scheduled such that when we can detect when like a government agency is being disingenuous and they're not giving us data, or they're changing the parameters of the data. I think a lot of this just lies with just bringing it to the American people, so people like Nick Shirley can go out and investigate this and find this. And then what your work is doing is actually making change in DC. I mean, you've testified in front of Congress to this extent. Like a lot of the Minnesota crackdown efforts are because you went there with the camera and you were like, let's go see what the Quality Layering Center is all about. And it went unbelievably viral, and people have seen it millions and millions of times, probably hundreds of millions of times. And that in itself has driven so much change. Like the work that you've been able to do has been unbelievably influential. So we need to continue to set up people like you for success, where you can continue to go out and find this stuff.
Yes, I believe so as well. Because if the information's there, people can actually go and see it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these companies, these fraudulent businesses, they have their businesses, they have their storefronts, and there's nothing in there.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
So you could have that piece of paper, walk up to that door, which you'll see me do in this California video. So you can walk up and you can go up to this, you can go up to the, so you can walk up and you can go up to the door and there's actually no business. But you can see from the government data set that they received $1 million.
Yeah,
And
for
that
what?
could just go out and root out fraud
Yeah.
instantly. But a lot of these states, like California, for instance, when I was trying to go through and get their data, the only data you could find was from 2023 and backwards. They don't want to publish that other data because they've had those increases in their budgets and they don't really want to show us where it's coming from. Or they're just delaying that information being out to make it harder for people to actually go and investigate. Because if you don't have the information, you can't go and do it.
Yeah.
That's why nobody could do the Minnesota video or go out and expose it, because everyone knew about that fraud, but nobody could go and expose it and show it like I did because they didn't get the data. And so when David had that data, we were actually able to go and show people what that fraud is. And let's just say 1 out of those 7 daycares wasn't fraudulent. Well, good. That means one person's running their business correctly, and the other 6 need to get shut down. And to this day, not a single daycare where they froze the funding to childcare has sent in any form of receipt to receive that money. If they had starving children and they had children to take care of it, they would send that receipt in instantly so they could get that money back.
It's crazy.
So when you think about how these fraudsters had never, ever been held accountable because
Not
they
once. Wow.
never felt like they were ever going to get caught.
Yeah, we should hold these guys accountable. We should do it now.
Yes, everyone needs to get held accountable for what they're doing because they're stealing from people. And if you had one message, and if somebody was asking you, all right, I want to make the most difference I can and become as knowledgeable as possible, what would be your advice?
I think you've got to do what makes sense to your heart, and that's always kind of different than what your rational mind will tell you. And then you've got to be brave, you've got to be bold, you've got to be willing to be a bit unconventional and contradict what people think is the right wisdom. And I think you've got to see also that there can be unbelievable, like there's unbelievable potential in this country. We can have unbelievable outcomes. We can do unbelievable things. The American spirit is the strongest spirit in the world. We are the strongest country in the world. And I also think you have to be hopeful. You have to understand that America is strong, and it can continue to be strong if we, stand up for what we believe in.
And who do you look up to in that way as kind of like your pillar of mentors per se? Or where did you get that from?
I think I look up to my father a lot. My father, he did this himself. He dropped out of Wall Street, very high paying job in Wall Street, to go start a random failing snack company. He bought this company. It was like totally belly up, and he reconstructed everything himself, and he's turned around into an incredible business. And I think externally for my family, I've seen this happen. I think Elon's been an unbelievable visionary guy, and I think, I am very inspired by the willpower and the determination President Trump has, because they've tried to kill him like multiple times, and he's kept on going. Despite so many things, we could sit here for an hour and it wouldn't be enough to talk about all the things that he's been through, and he's still here. And I think there's a lot of other people like that I think are worthy of looking up to.
We've talked about Elon a lot in this episode, but I feel like the reason why is because he's one of the most powerful people, the richest person in the world, who's in the same fight.
That's very rare, by the way. Like you look at the rest of the billionaires list, they just don't care. It's pretty crazy.
What's the number one thing you've learned from Elon Musk?
Ooh, there's so many good things I've learned. There's just being around him and working for him, you pick up on so many kind of nuanced things about how to manage things, how to build things. But if I was to distill it all into one point, it's that you've got to do what you think is right. That's the biggest thing about Elon. Like, Elon is the guy who's willing to sit there and contradict everyone when he is convicted that something is right. And I think it's the number one takeaway from working with Elon, and the number one thing that I think you can take away from anyone is someone is in, like, they are just hardcore in pursuit of the truth. They are trying to find the truth, because the only way that we can go out and make these things better is to really, be super hardcore about finding what the truth is first. So I think if I was to distill the Elon mindset into one thing, it would be truth maxing. Just really, really go try to find the truth about a specific topic, and then go very deep into it. That's the way that he works.
And what's the number one thing you've learned from Trump?
I think the determination to win, and also the ability to keep going no matter what. In a very, there's one thing which is like determination of, I'm going to overcome myself to get to this goal. And it's another thing when a lot of other people are saying, oh, you can't do that. I mean, the funniest thing that I've seen is the fix everything switch on X, where it's like, oh, you can't press the switch. It's not as simple as pressing the switch, or, it's pretty funny. But really all you have to do is click the switch. And he's been able, like, he's someone who has been willing to fight for the causes that he believes in for a very long time. And he's fighting super hard on behalf of the American people.
In Big Balls, you've worked for Doge. You're currently working in the government. What's the number one thing you've learned since working in the government?
I think you can always make things better if you try really, really hard to make things better. And I think that's applicable for all of life. Everything can get better with a lot and a lot and a lot of effort. Not instantly. It's definitely not right away. It's delayed gratification. But over time, if you really, really, really strive, you can make things better. You have that power as an individual.
And what have you been able to see as you've tried your hardest to make a difference? What are some of those results that you've seen personally?
I've seen conversations like this start to happen, where we actually start to meaningfully look at fraud. I've seen the cabinet secretaries start to, really get super hardcore about this. I've seen the technology that we've launched so far already be a drastic improvement over what the government has launched already. Like the open source data set is a great example of this, because
I don't think people realize how big of a thing that was for them to open source the data for the HHS.
Yeah.
They've never done that. They've never said, all right, public, here's
all the data.
Go
Here's
look.
all the skeletons in the closet. That's really what they gave, because every other political administration would be too sensitive about the skeletons in the closet. They don't want to show it.
Because they're basically saying, when they release that, they're saying, all right, there's fraud, Republican and Democrat. It doesn't matter at this point. Go and find it.
Yeah. There's fraud everywhere, right? And this is just like a way of hanging everything out and saying, let's go find the truth.
Because I believe that was a direct result of my video, is they felt that pressure and they said, well, there's actually a lot, and maybe if we do kind of decentralized Doge for the entire country to go out and look for it, we're going to be able to find more of it.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
actually going to incentivize these people to find the fraud, because if they find fraud and we get that money back, we're actually going to give them a cut. Scott Bessent said that if you're a whistleblower and if you find fraud, we'll actually give you a percentage of it that comes back from that fraud.
Yeah, it's a really cool program. And I was in these conversations when we were deciding to do this, and it was inspired by people like you. It's like people don't know how much impact they can have. They don't know how much they can actually shape the world around them for the better. And I think that's something that people have to realize.
100%. While we've been doing this podcast for the past 2 hours,
Wow.
the national debt has gone up $810 million.
Almost $1 billion.
Almost $1 billion in 2 hours. If that doesn't make you think that there is a national debt crisis here in the United States, I don't know what will. Kind of crazy. What do you think that money went to? What's the most stupid thing you think that money went to while we were talking?
Well, some very legitimate learning centers, obviously. I mean, think about all the kids that have been educated now by the Somalis with that money.
With all the learning centers. They've taken it all. Someone probably just cashed in $1 million. How much of that do you think is fraud right there, of that 800 and now $14 million?
I think probably 20% at least.
Well, Big Balls, thank you so much for coming on, Edward. It means a lot. I highly suggest anyone watching this to share it, like it, because I think what we talked about, there's a lot of really important stuff that we talked about.
Yeah, I agree.
So I highly encourage anyone who's watching this to give it a like and then to share it as well and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much.
Hell yeah.
Next news. Breaking news.
I'm Gary Franchi coming to you from the White House, where President Trump is fighting a battle that should have been won decades ago. Foreign adversaries have set up entire companies, and their sole purpose? Getting pregnant women onto American soil just long enough to exploit our citizenship laws. And now even voices you'd never expect are admitting the system is completely broken. Now here's why this matters to you and your family. We're $39 trillion in debt. Our economy is straining under the weight of an immigration system that's been weaponized against us. And while hardworking Americans struggle to make ends meet, foreign nationals are literally booking vacation packages to have babies here, guaranteeing their children American citizenship and all the benefits that come with it. It's not about being heartless. This is about our survival, our hospitals, our schools, our social services. They're being stretched to the breaking point. And the worst part, our enemies know this is a weakness. They're exploiting it. China has birth tourism companies operating in plain sight. This is an invasion hiding behind a legal loophole, and President Trump is the first leader with the courage to say enough. And speaking of being prepared for what is coming to this country, you just heard how foreign adversaries are exploiting our system from the inside. If a major disruption hit tomorrow and you couldn't get to the store, how long could your family survive on what's in your house right now? Well, My Patriot Supply is America's #1 preparedness company with over 3 million customers who refuse to be caught off guard. And right now at preparewithgary.com, their best-selling 4-week emergency food supply comes with a free additional week. That's 5 weeks of security for your family. When our enemies are openly exploiting our borders and our laws, hoping for the best is not a plan. Go to preparewithgary.com and protect your family before you need to. All right, now let me show you exactly what's happening and why this debate has even liberals scratching their heads. What I'm about to show you, it proves that the tide is turning on the issue. And it's not just conservatives who are saying it anymore. This first clip lays out something most Americans don't even realize exists. We're talking about foreign companies set up specifically to help people exploit our system. Listen how they describe what our adversaries are doing to us right now. Watch.
I do think there's a large conversation, this is part of it going on in the country right now, about who we're letting in here and why they're here and whether they are loyal to the United States of America. And that's a good conversation for us to have. Now, whether it gets resolved in this court venue or whether it gets resolved in Congress or in other ways. For instance, this conversation over birthright tourism that's going on. I mean, you have foreign adversaries set with companies that are set up to help people facilitate having births in the United States to exploit our system. That is a worthwhile thing for the American people to know. It's a worthwhile debate for us to have. So how the court comes out on this, I don't know. But that's information that we need to know because we do have foreign adversaries that are trying to infiltrate the country and exploit what's been our good nature for many years.
Did you catch that? Foreign adversaries with companies set up to facilitate having births in the United States to exploit our system. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is organized, systematic abuse of American generosity. And he's right. This is information the American people need to know. But here's where it gets even more alarming. One of the most respected legal minds in the country just called the situation insane. Jonathan Turley is a constitutional scholar who testifies before Congress. He's not some partisan talking head, so when he uses words like existential threat and perfectly insane, you need to pay attention to what he says next. Watch.
The fact that we are one of the few countries that continues to embrace birthright citizenship is perfectly insane. And it is a great danger to this government and to this republic. So the question for these justices is not necessarily if they agree with birthright citizenship. I expect the majority does not. But this is what I call in my Supreme Court class a default case. It's when the record is messy. Where do the justices run home to? And what was really astonishing yesterday is it appeared that we might have 9 originalists on the court because the liberal justices started to channel Scalia and to say, oh, you know, we've got to stick with the original intent here. These are justices, when they look at other rights like the Second Amendment, treat that language as barely a speed bump. And they say, well, we have to look at this living Constitution and the problems we're facing today. Well, the problems we're facing today on birthright citizenship are existential in my view.
Did you hear what he just exposed? The liberal justices on the Supreme Court suddenly became originalists on this issue. The same justices who treat the Second Amendment as barely a speed bump now want to stick with the original intent. Turley sees right through it. They know birthright citizenship, as practiced today, is indefensible. Now, here's where things get really interesting because it's not just conservatives saying this anymore. You know who Stephen A. Smith is, right? He's not exactly a Trump supporter. He's a mainstream media voice who usually toes the liberal line. But when Bill Mitchell shared this clip, I had to see it for myself. Watch what happens when even he can't deny reality anymore. Watch.
What I'm asking you, as American citizens in the United States of America, do you or do you not have a problem with birthright citizenship? I do. And I'm a brother that loves my Latino brothers and sisters. Absolutely love them. And I'm talking about, and I see people in impoverished areas, and, you know, where tyranny is reigning, and whether it's from Haiti or other places, and I'm like, damn, we got to help them. We're the richest country in the world. I got it. We got to help them. To me, if I was the president, I'd do everything I can to make sure the border was closed. But in the same breath, I wouldn't be trying to bother too many people here, other than the criminals. Because we're a gorgeous mosaic, and folks, migrants helped build this country. But we are in desperate times. And when we going to realize that? We're $39 trillion in debt. Our economy is not strong. It's threatening to unravel before our very eyes. Unemployment isn't dissipating. There's been crime. There's pestilence and poverty. There's a lot going on in this country, and there's a lot of evidence that gives people cause to pause and make them scared of the state of affairs that exist in our nation. How do you resolve that? If you're just letting people walk in, especially people who intentionally cross the border illegally just to give birth to someone, to a kid on American soil, to ensure that they're American citizens. And it's clear that that's the intent. What do you do then? Would I handle things differently if I were the president? You're damn right I would. Do I think he's done a lot of things wrong? You're damn right I do. But not everything. Not everything. And I just had to say that about birthright citizenship. Remember, it was originally, the 14th Amendment originally came into play to ensure that enslaved people brought to this country forcibly would be American citizens. But the language was vague and everybody got to use it to their advantage. And what the president is saying now is it wasn't meant for everybody. Supreme Court, or rather the Constitution, wasn't definitive with that in its language. And the Supreme Court has interpreted it as such. But it doesn't mean that a compelling argument can't be made for it to address us, especially if as a nation we are in a state of emergency, which some, meaning millions upon millions of people, would argue we are. That is a fact. That is the reality.
That's Stephen A. Smith saying, I have a problem with birthright citizenship. A man who says he loves his Latino brothers and sisters, admitting we're in desperate times with $39 trillion in debt. He called out people who intentionally cross the border illegally just to give birth. Even he gets it now. But the consensus is building. And now the full legal breakdown that ties this all together. Turley absolutely dismantled the legal arguments for keeping this broken system. Watch how he explains why this isn't just bad policy, it's an existential threat to the republic itself. Watch.
The idea that you can set foot on this soil, give birth to a baby, and become a citizen, that is an insane argument. And I agree with John Sauer that it is applicable, even though it is not a legal argument. Your thoughts, Professor Turley?
Well, Kaylee, it's never good, either on a first date or a Supreme Court argument, to start out with the other person saying you're awfully quirky. That was a gulp moment for the government, and it didn't get much better after that. The fact is, you're perfectly correct. I mean, the fact that we are one of the few countries that continues to embrace birthright citizenship is perfectly insane. And it is a great danger to this government and to this republic. So the question for these justices is not necessarily if they agree with birthright citizenship. I expect the majority does not. But this is what I call in my Supreme Court class a default case. It's when the record is messy. Where do the justices run home to? And what was really astonishing yesterday is it appeared that we might have 9 originalists on the court, because the liberal justices started to channel Scalia and to say, oh, you know, we've got to stick with the original intent here. These are justices, when they look at other rights like the Second Amendment, treat that language as barely a speed bump. And they say, well, we have to look at this living Constitution and the problems we're facing today. Well, the problems we're facing today on birthright citizenship are existential in my view.
There it is. Turley called it a gulp moment for the government's lawyers when the justices called their argument quirky. He said the problems we're facing are existential, and he exposed the hypocrisy of liberal justices who suddenly care about original intent when it suits them. The mask is completely off. So let me bring this all together for you. Here's the bottom line. You just heard from legal scholars, media personalities across the political spectrum, and constitutional experts all saying the same thing. Birthright citizenship, as it's being exploited today, is insane. It's dangerous, and it's an existential threat to our republic. Foreign adversaries have built entire industries around exploiting this loophole. We're one of the only countries in the world still allowing this. And President Trump, he's the only one with the courage to finally challenge it. The Supreme Court is watching, the American people are waking up, and even liberals can't defend this anymore. And this is exactly why we do what we do here at the Next News Network. The mainstream media won't show you these clips. They won't tell you that even their voices are turning on the issue. But you need to know the truth. So share this video with everybody you know. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think it's time to end birth tourism? Subscribe, hit the notification bell, because the story is far from over. President Trump is fighting for us, and we're going to be here covering every single development. I'm Gary Franchi, reporting from the White House. Stay informed and stay free.
The system controls information. Information control is power.
They don't want you to see this.
The truth only survives together. They don't want this shared. Share this now. You know out.
All bad things must come to an end, and if you asked all the people in this photo, it was a very, very bad thing. Pam Bondi as Attorney General. I know so many of the people in this photo. One of the people who got an Epstein binder in this infamous moment at the White House is my executive producer, ALX. And inside of this binder was the already public Jeffrey Epstein flight logs that had been redacted as, like, I don't know, some type of new insult to the people who were there at the White House, defenders of the president, people who like MAGA, people that helped the president win the White House. Why would you insult them like this and hand them already publicly available information, trot them out in front of all of the media in the world? Normally, there's not photographers just standing right outside of the White House. This seemed to be done on purpose or with, like, malicious intent or out of absolute incompetence. I'm not sure which, but at some point it doesn't really matter because the cake is baked. And thus started the saga of punching ourselves directly in the nuts over Epstein time and time and time again in this administration. It's been very, very frustrating, I know, for the president, for many of the people involved, because I know a lot of the people involved. And so this is just sort of like an iconic photo of, like, a misread and a misunderstanding of the current moment in American politics. And it may well cost Pam Bondi her job. Here we go. The top article in the world right now. Pam Bondi begged Trump not to fire her during dramatic White House showdown as insider reveals the final straw. So Pam Bondi allegedly is being fired. Here is the core article that, again, alleges this, written by Shelby Talcott, who is a boutique reporter for Semaphore. Again, a little boutique outlet, but not as bad as most fake news outlets, I guess, if I'm trying to be courteous here. They could still get it wrong, but here we go. The president has informed Pam Bondi that her time is nearing an end as Attorney General. Multiple sources tell me. Formal announcement hasn't come yet. The normal caveats shouldn't that he could change his mind apply. He's been speaking with advisors, a possible replacement. Pam Bondi is aware of that as well. So here we go. Trump has told Bondi her time is over. So imminently, Pam Bondi will be replaced as Attorney General. Trump has not made a formal announcement about Bondi's replacement, but typical sources say that Trump can also change his mind. Bondi's anticipated departure follows a tumultuous 14 months at the helm of the Justice Department. The Jeffrey Epstein investigation becoming a constant thorn in her side. Recent weeks' long simmering frustration among Republicans over the chaotic release of the files resulted in bipartisan congressional subpoena. Trump lost confidence in her leadership. Attorney General Pam Bondi is a wonderful person. She's doing a wonderful job, Trump said in a statement to Semaphore on Thursday morning. Okay. So Trump's talked to people about the best person to replace Bondi. Apparently, Lee Zeldin is high on the list. It's a little strange. I'm not sure. I have nothing against Lee Zeldin, but, like, it's a peculiar pick. Ladies and gentlemen, let's find out about Pam Bondi begging Donald Trump. This is what the leakers are saying inside the White House. I thought this White House doesn't leak. I don't know. Bondi responded by hearing she's out of a job for an unforgivable offense. Let's read. President to give her more time in the role, Pam Bondi begged for more time in the role. Trump remained firm that her time leading the agency is over. She was unhappy and tried to change his mind, the source said. However, the president told her that she was fired and that the announcement would be made shortly. The announcement would be set for Friday, now is imminent because of the media attention, according to the source. Trump reasoned for the sudden dismissal comes as part of a president believes that Bondi tipped off Eric Swalwell about the FBI's efforts to release investigative documents. Goodness gracious. The FBI was preparing a cache of documents on Swalwell's relationship with Fang Fang, the Chinese spy. Her intervening in those matters, the White House wasn't pleased. She was intervening due to a personal friendship with Swalwell. Well, that's not good. Why would you have a personal friendship with Eric Swalwell? That's insane and silly. What the hell is that about? Anyway, The Daily Mail revealed that Trump is preparing to replace her, speaking to several people. Okay. My thoughts on this, and let's just jump right in here, shall we? By the way, the New York Times also. Trump has discussed firing Attorney General Pam Bondi. This is the New York Times. Take on it. President Trump has not made a final decision, but he floated the idea of replacing Bondi with Lee Zeldin. I'm not going to pay the New York Times to read this article. Trump likely to replace Bondi as Attorney General, but no final decision made yet. Okay. One final report here. Let's go. This is Dasha Burns. She's with Politico. They are fake news, by the way. But here we go. Person familiar with the situation tells me Pam Bondi will be out as AG imminently. Trump met with the EPA boss Lee Zeldin on Tuesday to discuss last year's California wildfires. Trump also discussed potentially tapping him
You tell me, Pomadaku. Babies are sleeping. Hmm.